Thunderbird Sanctuary. Lucien followed Newt and Stanley as they apparated to the foot of a high mountain. A dull thunderclap rolled over them, and heavy black clouds hugged the peak. Newt glanced up, nose twitching as he sniffed the charged air. The thunder and lightning have slowed to about one strike every 5 seconds, and there's more moisture in the air, he said. The timing's about right. The Thunderbirds should have finished mating. Stanley, standing at his side, nodded. Yes, it's the window after mating and before egg-laying when Thunderbirds are easiest to approach. Lucien hung back and listened, committing the exchange to memory. Read 10,000 books, travel 10,000 miles. Meeting people on the road was another way to learn. He let out a small sound, more to himself than anyone else. Before they could move on, a sharp, clear cry cut through the thunder and dropped from the ridge above. Newt and Stanley drew their wands at once. The cry belonged to a Thunderbird and meant it was coming in fast. Lucien drew his wand too, but he wasn't scared. He was curious. The unicorn's blessing still hummed inside him, and he could understand the meaning of that call. Old friend, you've come. A second, softer call answered close at hand, and Newt's face lit with recognition. A shadow passed, and a bolt of lightning lit a gigantic shape as it descended some dozen meters away. Even at that distance, its wings stirred a gale that almost knocked them off their feet. The bird was enormous, 3 pairs of sweeping wings, a wide wingspan, golden feathers on its back, and pure white beneath, tail feathers that shimmered metallic. A crown of golden plumes haloed its head like a tiny sun. Its eyes were bright and sharp, flashing like lightning. Frank, long time no see, Newt chuckled, stepping forward. The Thunderbird shuffled toward them and lowered its proud head when Newt reached out. Lucien's memory ticked. This was the Thunderbird that had once brought oblivion down over New York. Thunderbirds live long lives, often 100 or 2, and at this age, Frank was still in his prime. The crown of feathers marked him as one of the most powerful in the region. Caw, Frank uttered, rubbing his head against Newt's chest. Newt listened carefully to the calls and murmured, all right, where do you want to take me? Frank chimed again. Newt hesitated, then remembered Lucien at his side. He looked over, and Lucien, reading the bird's intent, translated softly, Mr. Newt, Frank says his mate is up on the peak. Oh, thank you, Lucien, Newt said. You're welcome, Lucien replied. Stanley's eyebrows shot up. Wait, Newt had just asked this boy to interpret the Thunderbird? And the boy, who could have passed for 12 or 13, had really understood the Thunderbird's thoughts? Stanley's own knowledge of Thunderbirds had let him make sense of some of Frank's behavior just now, but not with that precision. He began to take Lucien more seriously. He remembered Newt's earlier description, an extraordinary talent with magical creatures, and for a moment wondered if Lucien might be Newt's grandson. He had met Newt's grandson before, though, and this boy didn't match. Frank let out another loud cry that sounded half surprised, half pleased. Kid, you can understand me? Lucien didn't mind being addressed by the old bird. He nodded. Yes. Is there anything else? Do you need our help? The Thunderbird beat his wings and eased around Newt, coming up to Lucien. My mate is laying eggs, but it's taking much longer than usual. Since you're here, could you check on her? No problem. Just a moment. Lucien relayed the request to Newt and Stanley. Newt had already seen Lucien receive the unicorn's blessing in the Forbidden Forest and trusted his ability to communicate with animals. Stanley, though still skeptical, followed Newt's lead. I brought plenty of herbs, Stanley said, enough to use if we need to. Frank offered his broad back without fuss. In the next heartbeat, he spread his wings and was airborne. Wind screamed past them, and in a few breaths they were at the mouth of the cave near the summit. Thunder rumbled. A soft cry, threaded with pain, came from inside. Frank answered anxiously and landed at the cave entrance. Lucien and the others jumped down. Inside, the nest was a wide, shallow pit of dry branches and grass. A female Thunderbird lay curled within. She was smaller than Frank by a noticeable margin, and her feathers were a brighter white. Lucien knelt at the cave mouth and spoke in a calm, steady voice to soothe her. Frank added gentle chirps, and Newt and Stanley prepared themselves to examine the bird and assist however they could. Somewhere else, in a dense stretch of jungle, another group was preparing. A band of poachers were finishing their gear. Their leader, a man with brown hair, addressed a striking black-haired woman with red lips. "Shirley, go for a one-shot." Shirley stretched languidly, her movements drawing a line of shadow and grace. "Got it, Alistair. Don't you worry about me." She tapped the man's chest with a flirtatious poke. Alistair's face hardened. "Your results decide whether we succeed or fail. I don't like surprises." Shirley merely twisted her hips and melted into the undergrowth. I know. The hunt begins." A black widow spider slipped silently through the grass at her feet. At the foot of the mountain, Lucien and the others sat around a bonfire. Newt, Stanley, and Lucien had helped the Thunderbird lay its eggs. Now they kept watch until they hatched. "The egg-laying is done. Now we just wait for the hatchlings," Newt said. "Stanley," Newt added seriously, "this is the Thunderbird's weakest time. The female is exhausted, and the male will guard the nest to the death. Poachers will surely try to take advantage of that. Please tighten security with the reserve manager." Stanley nodded gravely. "I understand. We do this every year." "By the way," Newt went on, "we were able to get the Thunderbird settled so quickly because of Lucien." Stanley turned to Lucien with open admiration. "Your way with magical creatures, I've never seen anything like it. Luckily, you were there to calm her. That made things so much smoother." Lucien waved his wand, nudging the fire to burn brighter. "Thank you. I'm just glad I could help." "And your potions work was excellent too," Stanley continued. "You saved us a lot of trouble. Your potions professor at Hogwarts, is it still Severus Snape?" "Yes, Professor Snape," Lucien replied. "No wonder." Stanley smiled. "I've met him a few times. He's stern and very knowledgeable. A famous teacher breeds exceptional students. He must push you hard." Lucien remembered Snape's sharp rebukes in potions class and the way he drove students to their limits. "Professor Snape is very strict. He insists on precise procedures." Stanley's eyes shone. "That's the kind of teacher a student needs." Lucien listened, intrigued by everything Stanley said about teaching and about Ilvermorny. As they spoke, the leaves nearby rustled. A small black and white bird shot out of the undergrowth and zipped toward a large rock, its strong legs churning. It pecked at the base of the stone a few times and, frustrated, let out a sharp chirp. Then it noticed the people by the fire. The bird cocked its head, stared at Lucien, and hopped over a few paces. It chirped again, small and plaintive. Lucien smiled and pulled a pouch of dried insects from his pocket, food he always carried for magical creatures like diracals. He offered some, and the bird gobbled them down without hesitation. Stanley watched and laughed. "Lucien, your rapport with animals is remarkable." "That little one is a North American roadrunner," Stanley offered. "They run more than they fly and eat spiders, frogs, and rodents. They don't usually come near humans." "Probably hunting," Lucien said, amused. He glanced toward the large rock. The black vortex in his eye of peering magic swirled slowly. "Spider?" He focused. Behind the rock, a black widow with a distinctive red marking on its abdomen rubbed its forelegs and in an instant shifted form. The spider elongated, limbs reshaped, hair darkened. Then a woman stood where the spider had been. Her hair was black as tar, her lips red. She muttered under her breath, slapping a hand to her chest in annoyance. That blasted bird had almost ruined everything. Shirley ran through the plan in her head. The operation had been in the works for months. Nearly 40 wizards were on the job. After the wars and years of attrition, 30 or 40 adult wizards were formidable. Poachers lived by violence. If a real fight broke out, they would be vicious. But Shirley was the linchpin. As an unregistered animagus whose animal form was a tiny, inconspicuous spider, she was an ideal assassin. She slipped into places the others could not and struck in the dark, fast and lethal. Newt Scamander was dangerous. If he opened his case and released the creatures, the poacher's plan would be ruined. But the creatures had to be neutralized first. Shirley was confident in her speed. One strike and Newt would be dead. If it went badly, she could at least cripple him, stop the case from being opened, and buy time for the rest of the team. After this job, she planned to retire to warm beaches, wine, and Alistair's arms. The fantasy was brief. She drew herself back to the present. Shirley took a breath and stepped out from behind the rock, wand in hand. "Avada Kedavra!" she hissed. A green flash leapt from her wand, aimed squarely at Newt's back. If it hit, their job would be half done. The curse had barely left her lips when a thin red beam struck it mid-flight. Magic collided, sparks and color flared, and Shirley increased her output without thinking, trying to force the spell through. The red beam swallowed her killing curse like a mouth with teeth, then slammed back and struck her in the chest. The force wrenched her wand from her fingers. Before she could react, a blue electric light slammed into her. Pain and numbness seared through her body, and her consciousness began to slip away. She pitched forward, limp. Apparition sounds cracked around her as dozens of wizards materialized. A sharp voice cried, "Shirley!" For a breathless moment, Shirley's world spun and went dark. Then the poachers revealed themselves. A dozen of them reversed their wands and drove the tips into the ground. "Parting of the earth!" they chanted in unison, and the earth beneath their feet rippled as a great fissure opened. Lucien's reaction was almost instantaneous. Before the arc of electricity still clinging to his wand had dissipated, he cast again. Transverse octopartite. Dozens of spears of condensed light sprang up from his wand and shot out in all directions. The poachers did not expect such a sudden, coordinated defense. They hurriedly threw up shields. They had lived dangerous lives and reacted fast. Protective charms bloomed, and some of them managed to blunt or divert the light lances. A few were pierced, but the strikes avoided vital points. They could still fight. Newt's reflexes were equally quick. He'd sensed trouble when Lucien struck and had already unlatched his briefcase. Now, seeing the poachers, Newt flipped it open and let several of his creatures free. Nifflers, a chimera, a horned serpent among them, but the case's defenders could not immediately protect him and his companions. The poachers' combined magic took hold. Cracks split the ground around them, and a dark barrier rose, separating Lucien and the others from Newt. Newt frowned. Boundaries? Anger steadied his features. He began working on deciphering and dismantling the barrier, sending arcane runes into his briefcase. At the same time, he watched Lucien. Lucien was still a young wizard, barely a year out of school. Talented, yes, but inexperienced in real-world danger. Newt hoped the creatures he'd unleashed could hold the attackers off until he'd broken the barrier. On Lucien's side, an alchemy had shot from the briefcase and coiled protectively around him. The creature had already grown fat and tree-thick, its glossy scales reflecting the firelight. Lucien patted the pale crest near its head. It gave a soft, reassuring hiss. "Don't be afraid," Lucien murmured, and the alchemy relaxed a fraction. "Please let me through. I don't want to hurt you," he added, and the creature obediently arched aside, leaving a small path. Lucien stepped out. From behind the crag he'd glimpsed earlier, Lucien saw movement. A brown-haired man kneeling beside the limp, black-clad woman, laying hands on her and muttering healing charms. The spider had reverted to human form after being surprised by the Roadrunner. Lucien's eye of peering magic had caught a trace of her magical signature. Animagi shared particular circuitry, and Lucien recognized the pattern. She was an animagus, unregistered and dangerous. Lucien pointed his wand and lightly traced runes in the air. The glow of transfiguration licked at nearby stones and trees. Aiden, one of the poachers, watched and felt his heart drop. He had sensed unease earlier, and now seeing Shirley so neatly incapacitated made him dread the worst. Aiden wasn't the strongest wizard in the group, but his ability to read danger and avoid it had kept him alive on countless raids. He wanted to pull back. They had come too far. There was no turning back. Besides, Alistair, leader and fool in love, would never allow retreat. "Kid!" Alistair bellowed, standing up and glaring at Lucien. His face was hard with fury. Newt was their prize, and any child with him was valuable leverage. Alistair's shout snapped him to attention, but in the next instant, red blades, 12 of them, sliced toward his chest, abdomen, and face. Instinctively, he threw up an iron shield charm. The blades clanged off the barrier with a ringing metallic sound that sent a chill through him. The boy looked tiny and unthreatening, and yet his strikes were precise and deadly. The other poachers' smiles vanished. Besides the blades aimed at Alistair, Lucien's magic had already wounded several of them. "Seize him. If he's Newt's grandson, we can force Newt to cooperate," one shouted, trying to rally the team with what seemed the most sensible plan. Expelliarmuses, binding charms, and slowing hexes flew toward Lucien in a barrage of non-lethal curses. Colorful explosions bloomed in the air and stirred dust into the firelight. Then a single loud gunshot cracked through the chaos, throwing several of the poachers off balance. Some of them, part of this group's peculiar American flair, carried pistols for emergencies. "Who fired that?" someone growled. "I said I wanted him alive." A dragon's roar responded, a sound heavy with pressure that made the hair on the back of throats stand up. Scorching breath swept the dust away, revealing the boy's outline. Lucien's outline. A dragon, a horned serpent, a cat leopard, and an acromantula had spilled from Newt's case and were already engaging the attackers. The poachers were suddenly confronted with creatures that were lethal in their own right, creatures with records of killing and maiming. They didn't know where they had come from, but the situation had gone from bad to impossible. Sharp-eyed men noticed the boy held something in his hand, a revolver. Had he fired the shot? Had the boy been the one to call the dragon? Aiden looked down at one of his closest companions, Soren, slumped in a spreading pool of blood. His legs were severed, and he'd passed out from shock. Aiden's shout of pain was half a cry, half a curse. Lucien glanced at the menacing creatures before him and felt something grin inside him. His transfiguration of creatures had become faster, more fluid, and he could maintain more of them. An idea flickered, and Lucien opened a small black and gold gourd he kept at his belt. "Norbert," he said casually, "come on out and have some practice." The gourd's lid slipped away, and a thin squeal issued from it. A small dragonling uncoiled, scales glinting, eyes bright and curious. It shot out, wings beating a rapid tattoo, and the air filled with the heat of its breath. The poachers reeled. Their plan, careful, long organized, had depended on surprise and precise timing. The sudden, coordinated defense from Lucien and Newt had blown it apart in seconds. Some of the men were struck and pinned, others scrambled to form defensive lines. Alistair barked orders that grew increasingly frantic. "Take the boy alive! Don't let the beasts get him!" Someone shouted back, "You think you can control those things?" But the words never finished as an acromantula lunged and knocked two of them off their feet. A horned serpent's sudden hiss and strike sent another rolling. Nifflers darted for trinkets and stumbled into pockets, pulling out shiny coins and small enchanted objects that sparked and snapped and caused further confusion. Newt's face was intent as he worked, fingers flying over runes. He gestured at his creatures, directing them with an astonishing calm in the middle of the chaos. He was trying to decode and undo the barrier with quick, precise syllables and pen strokes of his wand. His concern for Lucien was evident in every movement. He kept glancing over, watching that young wizard's resourcefulness with a mixture of pride and worry. Lucien, for his part, stayed deadly calm. He had the Akami at his back, the dragonling to his side, and a revolver in one hand. His transfigurations shifted stones into spears, branches into snapping barriers, his charm work a flurry of small, effective spells. He wasn't reckless. He was efficient. When one of the poachers managed to raise a rope-thick binding, Lucien flicked his wrist and the rope melted into a puff of ash. When another lunged with a wand aimed at his face, Lucien flicked his eyes and the young man's elbow spasmed, sending the wand up and out of his hand. The poachers tried to regroup. Alistair, furious and desperate, threw himself into the middle of the fight, barreling for Lucien, with two men at his back. Aiden, shaken but sharp, took cover and tried to stem the bleeding of his teammates while keeping an eye on the situation. He had no illusions about the man he served. Alistair was a brute with charm and a bad heart. "You'll pay for this," Alistair snapped through gritted teeth as Lucien's dragonling lunged past him and nipped at the heels of his men. "You'll pay, Newt. We'll take everything. Lucien raised his revolver, and there was a blink in the air as he fired again, this time a warning shot that rattled through the undergrowth and sent several lesser attackers diving for cover. "Stop," Lucien called, his voice small but steady. "Leave. The woman is hurt, and we won't chase you if you retreat now." It was an offer, not a surrender. Alistair's expression flickered between calculation and rage. He counted his losses, men down, others injured, their carefully plotted operation unraveling by alchemy and creature and the audacity of a schoolboy with a gun. He bared his teeth, then laughed, a hard, broken sound. "You think we'll run just because you ask?" he spat. "We came for profit. We came for power. We." A sharp crack cut his words off as a horned serpent struck at his hand and shredded the cuff of his sleeve. He staggered back, cursing and bleeding. A spider the size of a large dog clung to the shoulder of another poacher, burning his skin with acid. The winners and losers sorted themselves with brutal speed. Newt, his spell work finished for the moment, finally found a moment to glance at Shirley. She lay on the ground, pale, the blue-streaked paralysis still holding her limp. The brown-haired man knelt beside her, working quickly but carefully to remove the enchantment. Newt frowned at him. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man looked up, brown eyes tired and sharp. "A friend," he said, "and I'm not on your side." "Then why?" Newt began. A flicker of something, regret or sorrow, passed across the man's face. "She was with our group until this plan started to destroy more than it fixed. I tried to stop her." He resumed his charms, delicate and precise. "I only wanted to save what I could." The words didn't explain everything, but Newt had no time for philosophical tangles. There were still men to face. He pushed to his feet, his wand moving in a slow arc. "I don't want anyone else hurt," he said to the attackers. "Leave now, and none of you need more than a warning." Alistair spat and backed away slowly, hissed orders to the remaining men to fall back, then made a run for it when he saw the balance of force had changed decisively. One by one, the poachers disengaged, some fleeing into the night with curses at their backs, others stumbling away on injured legs. A few were left behind, bound, unconscious, or worse. When the last of the poachers had tumbled into the dark and the forest settled, Newt finally lowered his wand. The Occamy crooned and folded back around itself. The dragonling danced on the tips of its claws, and the Niffler guarded a pile of coins as though proud of its loot. Newt sank onto a nearby log with a long breath. "That was unpleasant," he said softly. Lucien allowed himself a small smile and closed his gourd. "Norbert enjoyed it," he said, half amused. Stanley pushed back his sleeves, rubbing at dirt and grime. "You were extremely quick, Lucien. If you hadn't reacted like that—" He let the sentence trail. The implication was grim. Newt looked at Lucien with a rare, open expression of approval. "You've got courage and resourcefulness," he began, then stopped. He glanced toward Shirley, who was stirring under the brown-haired man's careful work. The paralytic charm had been only temporary. Shirley's eyelids fluttered. When she opened them, the black was gone from her face, replaced by a thin, calculating stare. The brown-haired man helped her sit. "You shouldn't move," he said, firm but not unkind. Shirley's gaze swept the clearing and landed on Lucien. For a second, the look was loathsome, anger, humiliation, and then it hardened into something resolute. "This isn't over," she hissed. Lucien met her gaze steadily. He had seen a lot of things in the short time he'd been away from school. Dangerous men, dangerous choices. He'd acted fast and without hesitation. "It is for tonight," he replied. Newt closed his briefcase, his face lined with fatigue and relief. "We should make sure the Thunderbird is safe," he said. "We'll check the nest, patch up what we can, and contact the reserve people. And someone should write a full report." Stanley snorted. "I'll do the paperwork. You two are better at the dirty part." Lucien watched Shirley as she was gently led away by the brown-haired man. Her shoulders were pulled back, defiant. She looked like a woman who had always believed in the righteousness of her choices. He wondered, as he often did, how someone ended up choosing darkness when the world offered other paths. For now, they'd stopped this attack. For now, the Thunderbird and its eggs would be left in peace. The fire burned on, and the night closed around them. Lucien sat back, the Occamy humming contentedly, the dragonling nestling warm against his leg. There would be more danger out in the world. There always was. But for the moment, the clearing held only the gentle sounds of restored safety and the muttered jokes of people too tired to be anything but human. 163. The poachers were wiped out. When did transfiguration develop to this point? Crack, crack! The sound of shattering was relentless. A spiderweb of fissures raced across the black barrier that had been formed from earth and stone. Newt jabbed his wand at it again. A large section crumbled and fell away. He stepped forward, wand and case in hand, into the clearing where Lucien stood. "Lucien, don't be afraid. I'm here." Newt's words died on his tongue. The sight before him stunned him into silence. A group of men lay strewn on the ground, each badly bruised and unconscious, bound by shackles of stone and packed earth that held them fast. Roaming among them were several unfamiliar magical creatures. Newt blinked and tried to place them. A dragon, an Occamy, a Niffler, an Acromantula. Apart from the Occamy, he didn't remember releasing any of the others. At the edge of the clearing, Lucien stood, calmly tucking a brass pocket watch into his coat as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Neat, unruffled, expression serene. The thought crept cold and slow through Newt's mind. Lucien had subdued these poachers? Then these creatures are— A weak voice came from under the dragon's claw. Newt's eyes went to the dragon, a Norwegian ridgeback, its normally pure black scales patterned with gold, giving it an almost noble air. Pinned beneath one of its talons was a blond man whose broad frame looked suddenly vulnerable. Cough, cough. Hitting's fine, but could I get some air? I can't breathe, the man wheezed. Aiden, the dragon rumbled. Lucien's single word made the talon ease its pressure, though the creature's orange eyes never left the man. Mr. Newt, are you all right? Lucien asked. Newt forced himself to answer. I'm fine. The little wizards took care of everything for me. Lucien, you're not hurt, are you? I see. Newt found himself at a loss. Lucien stepped closer, and in the same crisp tone explained, My first-year defense against the dark art professor is excellent. He taught me a lot of practical skills. Newt's mouth twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The dark arts, how to defend against them, how to fight. There had always been only a handful of teachers who could truly rival that kind of knowledge. One paced and drank tea in the headmaster's office. The other had been imprisoned in Nurmengard. Still, a first year, barely into his second year, displaying that level of composure and skill gave Newt pause. But he had more pressing matters. Mr. Newt, we've handled things here. Let's hurry to help Mr. Stanley. Newt nodded and aimed his wand at the remaining barrier. The dispel this time consumed magic but was much quicker. Don't worry about Stanley too much, he said as they moved. He used to teach defense against the dark arts at Ilvermorny. He's very capable in a fight. Lucien raised an eyebrow. He used to teach Dada? Now he's a potions professor? Newt chuckled. He tried Dada for a few years, then found potions more interesting. There happened to be an opening, so he switched. Lucien nodded in understanding. Newt hoped a certain potions professor who secretly wished to teach Dada wouldn't hear of it. By the way, Newt asked as they reached Stanley, what about these creatures? He gestured toward the dragon, the Niffler, the Occamy, and the Acromantula. Lucien's expression was lit with an odd, casual pride. Except for that Norwegian ridgeback, they're all transfigurations, he said plainly. Not real. Newt's wand hand froze mid-gesture. Transfigured magical creatures? He must have missed a development in transfiguration while he was in seclusion. These were almost indistinguishable from the originals at a glance. He studied them again, trying to find any telltale signs. None obvious. What did Lucien mean then by except for the Norwegian ridgeback? Was Norbert real? Crack. From the other side, the last fragments of the barrier fell away faster than anyone expected. A voice called sharply, Don't be afraid, child. I will protect you. The shout cut off into a relieved laugh when Stanley saw Newt. Oh, Newt, you were quick. He let go of a poacher he was holding. The man hit the ground with a dull thud. I questioned this one while I was breaking the barrier. He basically told me everything. They're an international poaching ring, wanted by ministries in several countries, Stanley said, his voice hardening. Their original target tonight was the Thunderbird, taking advantage of this season when the birds are weaker. After they encountered you, Newt, someone had the bright idea to attack you and steal your case as a bonus. Stanley glanced at Lucien with a mix of relief and gratitude. If the boy hadn't intercepted the assassin who slipped in, Newt might have been killed. The killing curse alone, launched at that moment, could have finished him before Stanley could react. The thought of what might have happened made Stanley's jaw clench. He hadn't had time to think of thanks before he found himself dropping into an assessment of the scene. Lucien, for his part, studied the poacher Stanley had discarded. The man's swollen face and bruised features told a story of rough handling. Newt watched him take in the residual blood on Stanley's left fist and the state of the prisoner. Lucien's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Veritaserum, he decided, could be ruled out. Stanley didn't look like the sort to carry that potion. His methods had been more physical than pharmacological. Newt's respect for Stanley's combination of wand work and hand-to-hand skill grew. Newt, although the creatures you brought are a little dangerous, they've helped a great deal, Stanley said with a relieved chuckle, nodding toward the dragon and the Niffler in particular. Don't worry, I won't say a word. As soon as Stanley pointed at the animals, something unexpected happened. The Niffler he had indicated solidified, then stiffened into a large stone. One by one, the others followed. The Acromantila's legs slowed as its chitin turned to bark and twig. The horned serpent hardened into a curved length of petrified wood. Even part of the dragon's flank seemed to shift and ossify into a mass of gray rock. The magical bestiary in the clearing lost its motion and life and became trees and stones, scattered like props abandoned on a stage. Inside a thunderbird nest, Lucien stroked the soft feathers on the great bird's chest, matching his breathing to its slow, crackling breaths until its agitation subsided. The poachers had been dealt with. Members of the Magical Congress stationed in the reserve had taken over the legal side of things. Frank, the Thunderbird King, had returned to them, not because his mate was ill again, but because he needed help for other Thunderbirds that had been injured or separated. So Lucien, Stanley, and Newt set off at once to rescue more birds. Lucien had other reasons to be eager. If he could help, he would, and the work might build goodwill with the flock. It would also let him observe and pick a Thunderbird suitable for the dance flight. He'd already prepared a dose of bone-blood baptismal fluid for Norbert to try. The results had been promising. The potion suited thick-skinned, robust species like dragons, and it had accelerated Norbert's growth considerably. The lone quest to dance with a Thunderbird was one Lucien was determined to complete. According to the system's requirements, the dance demanded that Lucien and the Thunderbird fly at full speed, maintain nearly identical velocities, and cover a continuous 100-kilometer distance. That ruled out freshly fledged birds that couldn't sustain the distance, and full-grown adults that flew too fast for Lucien to match. Choosing the right partner was crucial. Fortunately, Lucien's affinity with animals let him communicate directly with them and assess their capabilities. If needed, he could consult Frank, who likely knew the flock well enough to point out suitable candidates. Lucien produced a portable cooking station from his gourd and, following Newt's methods, began preparing foods and nutrient solutions the Thunderbirds preferred. Newt and Stanley had finished their checks and stood at the cave entrance, watching him work while gently petting one of the calmer birds. Conversation drifted between them as they waited. Stanley broke the silence first. Newt, I have to ask, when did transfiguration on your side reach this level? Transfiguring magical creatures, he said. Newt frowned. I don't know much about advanced transfiguration, but that sounds like it would be a taboo breakthrough. I've never heard of a wizard who could truly transfigure magical creatures. I've been in seclusion these past years, Stanley conceded. I'm not up on every cutting-edge paper, but something like that would make the journals, Transfiguration Journeys and the like. The creator would surely receive the Order of Merlin, at least second class, maybe first. That news would reach everywhere. Newt shrugged. Maybe Lucien researched it himself. The suggestion hung between them. Stanley's eyebrows shot up. You're joking. Lucien, he's talented, yes, but to create a whole new branch of transfiguration. By the way, Newt cut in, remembering their first meeting in the Forbidden Forest. How old is he? About 12 or 13, Newt guessed. Stanley stared. How old? I'm not certain. He's just finished his first year at Hogwarts and will be starting his second after the holidays, Newt said. Stanley paced his gaze between Lucien, who was busy at the cooking station, and Newt. He exhaled slowly. Even if affinity with magical creatures is innate, the potion work and the possible transfiguration you described, does that sound like something a child who hasn't even begun his second year could master? Newt scratched his curly hair awkwardly, then offered the only explanation that satisfied him. Dumbledore and I spoke about him. Dumbledore said the boy has extraordinary aptitude. He called him a genius. If Dumbledore had said so, that explained a lot. Stanley relaxed a little, amusement in his voice. I wonder if he'd like to stay and visit the U.S. for a while. He seems interested in Ilvermorny. Newt bristled at the tone. He knew Stanley to be teasing, but his friend's words carried a possible sting. Lucien's curious. He likes to learn about different styles of magic, he said guardedly. Stanley's smile widened. A good, curious child. That's marvelous. Also, Stanley added, I saw him use an undetectable extension charm to hold a dragon. That's mine, Newt said quickly. He explained, as he often did, that while privately owning dragons was illegal, he kept a vast collection of rescued magical creatures in his case. It was his way of rescuing and protecting them. The ministry generally allowed him leeway because of his work. Still, Lucien was young. He hadn't earned Newt's seniority or reputation. Newt remembered why he'd once been expelled from Hogwarts. A creature he'd raised had harmed someone, and though it wasn't directly his fault, he'd taken the blame for a good friend and later a future sister-in-law. The memory stung. He did not want Lucien to suffer the same fate. He'd been forming an idea since their last meeting in the Forbidden Forest, when they'd saved a unicorn together. Lucien deserved a wider, safer case for transporting creatures. Newt was determined to prevent anyone from hauling Lucien off or exposing him to unnecessary danger. If Hogwarts lost a student of Lucien's caliber because of an avoidable mishap, Dumbledore would probably come for him personally. Stanley laughed at Newt's sudden seriousness. I'm only teasing about Ilvermorny recruitment. Do you think I'd report him to the ministry, get him expelled, and then swoop in to steal him for Ilvermorny? Newt had no answer, but he knew Stanley well enough to recognize the joke. Still, the underlying thought of taking a brilliant child away to another school left Newt resolute. Lucien, absorbed in his cooking, heard enough of the conversation to smile quietly. Stanley was a charming man, forceful with a cheerful twinkle in his eye. If he had the chance, Lucien would love to visit Ilvermorny, but the magic schools he knew didn't seem to have exchange programs. That absence tugged at him. He imagined a future in which the magical world's educational systems were more open, encouraging cross-cultural study and cooperation. For now, though, he stirred the pot and thought only of choosing the right Thunderbird to match in the air. 165. Dances with Thunderbirds, a new way to play with animagus. Atop a high peak in the Thunderbird Sanctuary, Lucien ran his hand along the great bird's neck. The Thunderbird beside him was one he had picked for this exercise, about 10 years old, past infancy but not yet fully mature. He had inspected many candidates beforehand. Those too young couldn't manage a 100-kilometer flight and were too easily distracted mid-air. The fully mature ones were simply too fast. When they pushed to full power, Lucien couldn't keep up, and that didn't meet the system's constraints. This one was ideal. It stood over 2 meters tall, the feathers along its back almost entirely gold. Are you ready? Lucien asked. The Thunderbird chirped, craning its neck toward the roiling sky and spreading its wings in a small, impatient stretch. Good, Lucien said. After this, your agreed food won't be shorted. Another chirp, and he turned a short distance away to where Newt was waiting. Lucien gave him an okay. Mr. Newt, see you at the finish line. Newt returned the gesture. When Lucien had first said he intended to fly with a Thunderbird, Newt had thought he'd misheard. Seeing Lucien actually go through with it, he could only shake his head with amused admiration for youthful audacity. With a witness in place, they could proceed. The system's dance above the clouds required one. Fortunately, the witness didn't need to follow the whole route, just stand guard at start and finish, so Newt was perfect. Stanley had been the other obvious choice, but he'd been summoned away by the Magical Congress to help treat an influx of hallucinogenic plants and psychedelic potions that had made their way from wizarding circles into Muggle communities. The situation supposedly had stretched the United States potions masters thin. Lucien recalled Stanley's reluctant look as he left and the invitation, come visit the U.S. in Ilvermorny if Lucien ever had the chance. Lucien had wanted to agree, but summer plans waited. The lead gray storm clouds rolled and ripped under a fierce wind. Lucien stepped off the cliff and plunged. Newt, close by, had long since grown used to his theatrics. The first time he'd nearly unleashed a swooping evil to drag Lucien back, but this time an ordinary owl burst from under the precipice and shot into the sky. Animagus, Newt muttered. Lucien had indeed become an owl. He rode the wind into the cloud bank, and then began a procedure that outstripped ordinary animagus work. An ordinary owl alone could not hope to match a Thunderbird. Even the fastest raptor would be outclassed. What he needed was a deeper transformation, a remaking that started from basic structure and worked outward, an internal reconfiguration of flesh and bone that combined shape-shifting technique with his own chimera experimentation. Under the dark clouds, Lucien's form blurred and reformed in the slipstream. The change was not simply outward, it was fundamental. The owl's head elongated, wings thickened and lengthened, feather microstructure reorganized for enhanced lift and aerodynamics. The body's proportions adjusted for speed and resilience. Within moments, he had become a bird that had never existed. An animagus mutated beyond standard limits, channeling Loki's formlessness. After years of trial and error, he had finally married chimera fusion theory with animagus technique. The result was uniquely his. A thunderous screech announced the Thunderbird's approach as it broke through the clouds to hover beside him. Electricity danced along its golden feathers in tiny sparks. It had been accustomed to Lucien's transformed forms and waited, patient and coiled, for his signal. Lucien's bird gave a clear, prolonged cry, the starting cue, and both birds took to the sky. Lucien used the vortices created by the Thunderbird's wings to fine-tune his posture, sometimes flying in perfect parallel, two streaks against the gray, sometimes curling and sweeping past its flank in tight, controlled rolls. The Thunderbird, finding a worthy playmate, pushed harder. Electric currents intensified across its plumage, the crackle of static loud against the roaring wind. Its speed climbed, and a moment came when it would have easily outpaced any ordinary companion. Lucien did not flinch. He felt the wand fused into his skin and hidden within feathers, the magic flowing along familiar circuits. With a single silent command, he formed an invisible ring of wind beneath his wings that slashed through air resistance. Redirecting the same magic, he threaded another silent charm through himself and felt, like a hand from the sky, his weight lift away. The discovery he had only recently made paid off. Animagi could still use magic in animal form. Not all spells, nor with the same ease as in human form, but uncomplicated charms worked if cast silently. Creating a human throat in animal guise had not helped. Vocalized incantations refused to sync with his altered channels. Silent magic, however, did. He lit the sky with a cascade of subtle propulsion charms, gusts, accelerants, efficiency writhes, each applied to his new body. He had the reserves to spare and a body tough enough to take the strain. This was the experiment he'd wanted. How far could raw metamorphosis go when coupled with deliberate magical augmentation? The Thunderbird's exceptional eyesight caught the shadow that swept past it, Lucien's transformed frame darting ahead for a heartbeat. With a fierce screech it answered, and its 3 pairs of wings began to hammer the air, producing thunderous gusts. The race became a weaving display of power and grace across the cloud line. Lucien matched it, not by blinding speed alone, but by precise control, by bending flow and weight to suit the dance. For 100 kilometers, they reenacted storm and lightning. The Thunderbird, a living tempest, Lucien, a lightning-bred companion, each pass and roll a flourish. In the wind and the crackle of static, in the silent creak of feathers and the whisper of charms, they completed what could only be called a dance across the heavens. As the finish line approached, Lucien could already make out Newt's figure on the mountaintop. With a clear cry, he surged ahead, just a hair faster than the Thunderbird, and shot past where Newt stood. Newt only felt a gust of wind and didn't clearly see the 2 figures that had sped by. Lucien reverted to human form as he landed, chest heaving from a mix of excitement and exertion. A soft chime sounded in his head. Ding! Congratulations, host. Thunderbird dance completed. Bone blood cleansing liquid loan repaid. Chirp! The Thunderbird landed beside him with a loud, demanding cry. Lucien understood immediately. It was hungry. He smiled, pulling from his pocket cooked steaks, braised ribs, and roasted ostrich, kept warm and fresh by magic, tasting just as if they'd just been prepared. He set out a nutrient solution suitable for Thunderbirds as well. After all the bird had done for him these past few days, the promised reward was not going to be forgotten. The only odd thing was the way the Thunderbird referred to him. Boss. Lucien shrugged it off and let the bird feast. Newt came over, admiration plain on his face. No matter how many times I see it, your transfiguration is astonishing. Thanks, Lucien said. By the way, have you registered with the Ministry of Magic yet? Not yet, Lucien replied. Headmaster Dumbledore said he'd take me to the ministry this summer. Newt nodded, relieved. Unregistered animagi faced serious trouble if discovered. Good. With Dumbledore involved, that'll be easy enough to sort. They fell into easy conversation about the magical aspects of being an animagus. Newt was endlessly curious. There were only 7 registered animagi in the records. If Lucien registered, he would be the 8th. There were undoubtedly illegal animagi out there, but they kept their identities close. When Lucien mentioned that animagi could sometimes communicate with animals in their animal form, Newt sighed. When I was younger, I thought of becoming an animagus, Newt admitted, because that ability would be very useful, but I never went through with it. I admire anyone with the courage to try. Lucien understood why. The final step of animagus transformation was dangerous, sometimes deadly. Besides, Newt already had a natural affinity for magical creatures. With practice, he could communicate well enough without taking that risk. Newt was, after all, the world's most respected expert on magical creatures. After a while, they apparated back to Stormwind Town. The Thunderbird stopped eating, looked around, and let out a questioning chirp, then realized no one else was there. Chirp, it called. Half a day later, having found Frank, the Thunderbird King, Newt opened the case he'd long intended to empty. With coordinated introductions and a few reassuring gestures, the king accepted the newcomer. The mating season was nearly over, so the addition wouldn't cause trouble. I've gathered a lot of material this trip, Newt said, eyes bright. Perhaps I can update Fantastic Beasts and where to find them when I get back. You're going to update the 53rd edition? Lucien asked, surprised. The book had reached 52 editions, and each new release had made waves by adding fresh discoveries and corrections, especially those coming from Newt himself. Newt smiled. Yes, and I owe you some of it, Lucien. You do? Remember those records you sent me, the ones on acromantilus and unicorns? Lucien did. He had spent more than half a month in the Forbidden Forest compiling them. Newt continued. And the winter incident in the forest, the unicorn foal. That experience was invaluable. Add these past few days, your ability to converse directly with magical creatures has given me much more to write about Thunderbird behavior. If you include them, you have my permission, Lucien said. Knowledge was meant to be shared, he believed. Making information available didn't diminish it, it made it lasting. Newt's face lit up. That's wonderful. I should acknowledge you properly. He hesitated, then thought better of revealing everything. He wanted to surprise Lucien. Newt planned to give Lucien Grafton a prominent thank you in the new edition, and to help build the boy's reputation in the field of magical creatures. If Lucien gained recognition and experience before graduating, choosing that path would be easier. It wasn't pressure, Newt told himself. It was simply laying another path and paving it a little smoother. With the matter of the Thunderbird settled, they returned to Stormwind Town. The trip to the United States had been a complete success. It was almost time to pack up and go home. As Lucien loaded his things, a loud cry cut through the bustle. He opened the window. A Thunderbird circled over Stormwind Town, calling out insistently. Lucien listened. He recognized the meaning without translating. The bird kept repeating the same plaintive cry. Boss, where are you? Why didn't you take me to your territory? Lucien's heart skipped. He was certain this was the bird that had flown with him. He frowned, puzzled by the question hanging in the air. In 67, Thunderbird, suitcase Stormwind Town. Lucien found an empty spot at the edge, and Newt fell into step beside him. He was still intrigued after hearing Lucien's explanation. Lucien called the circling Thunderbird down and guided it to land. As soon as it touched down, the bird hopped over and began chattering nonstop. Boss, when are we going to your territory? I'm hungry again, boss. Do you have more food? I don't want to stay here long. Missily, there are always humans hiding and peeking at me, thinking they're well hidden. Lucien hadn't realized this Thunderbird was such a chatterbox during the past few days of interaction. He quickly cut off its babbling and moved to the point. Hold on. Why did you fly here? And why do you call me boss? The Thunderbird blinked in confusion. It hadn't expected its boss to ask such obvious things, but it had to answer, so it chirped a few times. Boss, you fly faster than me, and after you won, you gave me food. That proves you can get food, and you acknowledged me. Aren't you my boss? Isn't that a Thunderbird rule? Lucien relayed what the bird had said to Newt, baffled. Newt was silent a few seconds. I've spoken with Frank. The king of Thunderbirds is indeed the fastest flyer and the best hunter in that region, but the specifics, winning a flying race and then giving food to the other? I'll add that to my notes, Lucien said. So Newt hadn't known that either. Lucien sighed inwardly and addressed the Thunderbird again. Our flying contest was just a game, okay? And that meal was a thank you for playing with me these last few days. The Thunderbird shook its head. A win is a win, and a loss is a loss. Besides, the prey you caught, boss, was delicious. What was I catching before? A vein throbbed at Lucien's temple. Was the bird stubborn or just freeloading? Raising a Thunderbird could yield valuable materials, but they were rare and costly. Unlike some of the other creatures he kept, Thunderbirds needed a vast range to fly, and Lucien's self-made gourd space definitely couldn't satisfy that need. Even Norbert, his dragon, took up enough space to keep him busy. Once he got home, he'd have to consult Newt or ask for help to expand his accommodations. Letting it roam free in the Forbidden Forest wasn't an option either. Britain's climate was too different. "Boss, where's your territory?" the Thunderbird asked, spreading its wings and letting out a proud cry. "If it's inconvenient for you to take me, I can fly there myself. I'm not that slow, you know. I can track your location. Thunderbirds have excellent navigation." Lucien groaned and relayed the conversation to Newt. Newt looked between him and the bird, then said, "Then you should take this youngster with you. It's too dangerous for an underage Thunderbird to cross the ocean alone." Lucien was taken aback, but raised his concerns about living space and environment. Newt waved a hand. "It's fine. I can help you solve that. Early exposure to various magical creatures is valuable, and you don't have to worry about the preserve or the magical authorities. I will take this Thunderbird under my name for the necessary rescue and observation. This isn't the first time this has happened. I have a bit of influence when it comes to magical creatures." Newt sounded as if he feared Lucien wouldn't want the responsibility, but that wasn't the issue. Lucien simply hadn't expected Newt to be so eager. Whether it was kindness or Newt valuing Lucien's talent with creatures, the result was the same. Newt wanted Lucien to interact more with magical creatures, to develop his interests and grow. Since Newt had volunteered, Lucien had no reason to refuse. "Mr. Newt, thank you for your help and support," Lucien said. Newt smiled, clearly pleased. "All right, I'll speak with the officials." After Newt left to make the arrangements, Lucien and the Thunderbird studied one another. Lucien hadn't expected to come to Arizona, only to wind up bringing a Thunderbird home. The bird chirped plaintively. "Chirp," it called. "Boss, hungry? Want to eat?" Lucien's mouth twitched. He was increasingly convinced the Thunderbird was just looking for an easy meal. "Wait here. I'll get you something." He counted up in his head. A Keelan, a dragon, a Niffler, a Thunderbird, colonies of acromantulas, mooncalves. He could almost open a zoo. Newt led him back home. Seeing the older man and the young man chatting and laughing, Tina looked pleased. "It seems your trip to Arizona was very fruitful?" "Yes, I learned a lot about Thunderbirds." Newt launched into a lively recounting of the journey. Tina listened with a smile. She knew her husband well. Whenever he discovered something new about magical creatures, he got like this. When Newt finished, she looked at Lucien with concern. "Lucien, you didn't get into any trouble, did you?" When Newt was young, his knack for causing trouble was as strong as his talent with creatures. Well, there was a little incident, but it was nothing," Newt said hastily. "Come on, I want to show Lucien something." He shepherded Lucien into his study before Tina could pry. The room was full of books and a few magical creatures, young or convalescent individuals, clearly kept there for easier care. The study had Newt written all over it. Newt walked to his desk, and, with a wave of his hand, the clutter flew away, leaving a single item, a briefcase. Seeing the case, Lucien felt a flicker of recognition and curiosity. 168. Gift, Newt's family status. Newt opened the case on his desk and said, "I thought of this during the Forbidden Forest incident. It would be much more convenient if you had a case of your own. It's not completely finished yet, but you only need to add some details, and I'm sure you can finish it." Seeing that Newt truly intended to give him the same kind of briefcase he'd guessed at earlier, Lucien protested. Thank you. I was actually going to ask if you could help me expand the space in my gourd, but this gift is far too generous. Newt raised a hand to stop him gently. Lucien, you said it yourself. It's a gift. I remember your birthday is coming up. Consider this an early present. Don't refuse, he added lightly. This case will suit you perfectly. Come on, take a look. Newt beckoned, and Lucien accepted without further pretense. He stepped into the case with Newt and stopped, breath taken by the sight. An endless grassland spread out under a soft, pleasant sun. A warm breeze carried the scent of hay and earth. A few twisted trees offered shade. A small, crystal-clear pond gleamed nearby, and beside it lay a dry nook padded with hay. This level is the entrance, Newt said. An entrance? Lucien couldn't hide his surprise. Was the entrance really this vast? Newt led him across the grass toward what looked like an ordinary rock wall. He traced a complex pattern in the air, and the stone rippled like water, revealing a spiral wooden staircase leading downward. Let's see the other floors, Newt said. They descended into a completely different environment, a dry, blistering desert. Heat rolled over them. Distant dunes shifted rhythmically, and a few lizard-like creatures, their scales glittering like gems, eyed them warily before slipping beneath the sand. Each spatial layer is independent and isolated, with Newt explained with a hint of pride. The environment, the climate, everything can be tuned. The heat on this layer won't affect the one above. You can cultivate magical plants that need specific conditions here, or run unstable experiments that require isolation. They crossed the desert and Newt opened another door. This time they found a cold, damp cave. Dew beaded on the stone walls, an ideal place for nocturnal or cold-loving creatures. As an heir of the Scamander family had every right to be proud of, Newt's case was a greatly expanded composite space, each layer self-contained. An undetectable extension charm, used with this level of precision, was truly rare. My case has seen a lot, Newt said quietly. It's helped me save and protect many lives. He looked at Lucien with deep, gentle eyes. This place is safe, private, and vast enough for any of your ideas. Newt handed him a small booklet. This records the methods to expand and repair the case. If you don't understand anything, write to me. Oh, and I made some extra modifications, Newt added. The case can be scaled up or down, and its exterior can be changed so it's easy to carry to school. Lucien accepted the booklet with sincere thanks. Thank you, I will put it to good use. Newt patted his shoulder. Don't mention it. Now, let's get out and eat. Back in the real world, Tina stood nearby with her arms crossed. She smiled at Newt, but her eyes were serious. Why were you rushing the boy away? Let's talk properly at dinner. What did you mean by small accident? At the dining table, she pressed the matter. Newt, when you said small accident, did you mean that if Lucien hadn't intervened, a killing curse would have struck you? And that you left a child alone against a group of vicious poachers behind a magical barrier? Her hand trembled slightly as she held her fork. Fear and anger threaded her voice. Newt avoided her gaze and stammered. Lucien was very calm. He was perceptive, and his magic was very good. Now's not the time to praise him, Tina said sharply. And Rolf's trip to see the hippogriff can wait. Tina shot Newt a glare that promised the matter would be settled later. Their grandson, Rolf Scamander, had no idea his long-awaited outing would be postponed because of the day's events. Then Tina turned to Lucien, her expression softening with concern and apology. I'm so sorry, Lucien. I wanted to take you out to celebrate, but Newt didn't look after you properly this time. Lucien sat up straight and met her eyes. Please don't apologize, Grandma Tina. That was a fight fought side by side. Professor Newt taught me a great deal. He's my mentor and my friend. When a friend is in danger, no witch or wizard would stand idly by. Tina sighed. You're such an understanding boy. Lucien smiled. My defense against the dark arts professor taught me that in dangerous situations, the most important things are calmness and perception. I just happened to put it into practice. Quirrell had indeed taught those lessons. Tom had later provided a harsh demonstration. Tina listened, and her expression softened further. Newt and I agree. You are a good child who loves to learn. How about this, she said, brightening. After we eat, we can talk defense against the dark arts, combat techniques. I used to be an auror in the States. Maybe I can teach you a few things that will interest you. Lucien's eyes lit. That would be wonderful. It would be my honor. Tina had been an Auror in her youth, chasing followers of Grindelwald across America. Unlike Newt, who preferred to use magical creatures in his errands and rescuing, Tina had been a frontline combatant. Those years had honed real skills, and Lucien wasn't going to refuse an opportunity to learn. After dinner, Tina demonstrated practical spells and combative techniques. Lucien's aptitude surprised her. He picked up incantations instantly and could reproduce moves after only a few tries. His reactions in dueling practice were consistently swift and precise. "Lucien," Tina said, impressed, "you'd make a natural Auror." Newt glanced over quickly. Tina, Lucien, he actually." Tina shot Newt a look. "Do you think there's something wrong?" Newt faltered and went quiet. Satisfied and grateful, having received a case like Newt's, learned new spells from Tina, and seen how Newt fit into his family's life, Lucien prepared to leave. He was about to summon Glimmer when a ball of crimson flame appeared beside him. A phoenix emerged and handed him a letter. Lucien held a small box in one hand, and the letter Fox had delivered in the other. The note's directions led him to a battered red telephone booth. "This is it," he said to himself. He pulled the door open and stepped inside. On the keypad, he punched 62442. The corresponding letters spelled magic. "Hello, may I have your name and the purpose of your visit?" A clear, feminine voice asked, not from the phone receiver, but as if spoken from thin air, right across from him. Lucien was not surprised. Dumbledore's letter had outlined everything. "Lucien Grafton, I'm here to register my animagus form with the Ministry." There was a pause. Lucien wondered if the device was malfunctioning. The booth certainly looked neglected. Just as he considered taking out his wand to prod it, the voice returned, this time with the faintest hint of surprise. "All right, processing now." A silver badge popped out of the dial in less than a second, embossed with his name and purpose. Then, the telephone booth began to lower like an elevator. Passers-by on the street gave no sign of noticing. After about a minute, it came to a stop. Lucien stepped out into a vaulted hall with polished dark wooden floors and a peacock blue ceiling filled with shifting golden runes. "So this is the Ministry of Magic," he murmured. It was his first visit, and he'd chosen to take the long, official route. Wizards who worked in the Ministry either apparated directly or used the less common toilet flush entrances. Few chose the public booth. He registered his wand at security, then followed the instructions and took an internal lift to the first basement level. He knocked lightly at the office door. It opened automatically. "Heavens, Cornelius, no need to have the minister personally fuss with such a small registration," said a familiar, amused voice. "Albus, you're too formal. This is not a bother." Another voice, richer, pompous, answered. Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, sat behind a deceptively old-fashioned but clearly expensive desk. He had fluffy white hair, a pinstriped suit, and a bright red tie. When he saw Lucien, dark green eyes and dark golden hair matching the description, he rose, beamed, and strode around the desk. His smile was almost painfully enthusiastic. "You must be Lucien, a truly remarkable young man. Please come in." "Minister," Lucien inclined his head politely. Dumbledore sat beside him. "Cornelius, your office has much on its plate, but animagus registration is normally handled by the Office for the Improper Use of Magic." "Normal procedures?" "Oh, no, no, no." Fudge waved a hand and looked at Lucien as if beholding a miracle. "This is no ordinary event, child. You're only 12. Your 12th birthday hasn't even passed. And you're an animagus. Merlin's beard. A miracle." Fudge gushed. Lucien had grown used to flattery. Before he went to Hogwarts, he had been the subject of similar praise from many people, some sincere, some out of respect for Aunt Penelope. He knew Fudge's admiring tone was also an attempt to measure the boy's value and to show deference to Dumbledore's presence. Fudge's words were a show of recognition and a half-invite to court favor. "Albus, we must file this properly," Fudge continued, his voice taking on an officious edge. "This kind of talent deserves minister-level attention." Dumbledore nodded. "Very well. Shall we begin the registration?" "Of course." Fudge produced a document with a golden border, more formal than the usual form. "The procedure is simple. You'll need to perform a transfiguration here, before me and Headmaster Dumbledore, so we can confirm and record your animagus form." Dumbledore gave Lucien a gentle, encouraging look. Lucien returned Fudge's smile and said quietly, "As you wish, Minister." He didn't intone any spell or make a noticeable movement. A soft pulse of light flashed through the office, and Lucien vanished. In his place sat a plain-looking owl, who spread its wings and tilted its head at Fudge. Truly excellent transfiguration. Astonishing to see it in person, an animagus of this age, Fudge declared, scribbling in his notebook. The registration complete, the three chatted for a bit. Afterwards, Dumbledore took Lucien with him, and they left in the lift. As it descended, Dumbledore handed Lucien a card. "I heard you've just returned from the United States. Did you have a good time? Would you consider going to France again?" Dumbledore asked. "France?" Lucien turned the card over in his hand. It was dragonhide, genuine dragonhide, not some cheap hybrid, and in the center a golden key shimmered with shifting runes. The key trembled slightly, its tip always pointing in some direction. Lucien recognized the craftsmanship and flipped the card to its back, where a name was printed in a tidy hand, Nicolas Flamel. Lucien kept the card and stepped back into the bustling streets. The golden key on the card shifted now and then, nudging him toward different places. He didn't have time to admire the scenery. Dumbledore's earlier words had lingered. "Lucien, your transfiguration has reached such a height, why not try writing a thesis?" A thesis. The thought made Lucien smile inwardly. Systematically organizing knowledge had always been part of mastering it. He toyed with topics: chimera transfiguration, a complex layering of transfiguration techniques, or a study of magical creature transfiguration, a nascent field that would likely cause a stir. He wasn't worried about others copying him. Both were immensely difficult, and by the time anyone caught up, he would be far beyond them. He decided, quietly, that he would write both. In a quiet alleyway, the key on the card shifted again. This time, it stood upright and pointed straight up. Lucien looked at the sky and, on impulse, used his eye of peering magic. The ordinary daylight folded away, and the sky became a silvery expanse, almost overwhelming his vision. Ancient runes and sigils moved beneath that silver surface, and Lucien watched, fascinated, as a rounded hemisphere materialized and aimed a black aperture at him. Magic gathered there as though preparing to fire. A colorful orb burst from the opening and exploded into a silent shower of fireworks. The motes didn't vanish. Instead, they rearranged in the air and spelled a single word: "Bonjour." Lucien traced the same greeting into the air with his wand. A soft white light enveloped him and lifted him upward. He did not resist, though he couldn't help thinking wryly, silver ship, white beam, very alien. None of it was noticed by any muggles. As the card in his hand crumbled to dust and thinned away, its fragments melting into the silver floor as if recycled, Lucien found himself aboard a vessel. An old man stood before him. He was the oldest person Lucien had ever seen. Hair and beard wholly white, skin lined like a map of ravines, a frail body wrapped in a crescent-white robe. The robe dragged on the floor, and the man moved as if supported on an invisible platform. Lucien thought of how someone might mistake him for a ghost. Despite the shock, Lucien bowed. "Hello, Mr. Nicolas Flamel." "Hello, Lucien Grafton." The old man's voice was quiet and steady. "Indeed, just as Albus and Newt said, you are a remarkable little wizard." Nicholas extended a very thin hand, moving slowly as though afraid of breaking it. Lucien stepped forward and took it, careful not to squeeze. He thought of the elixir of life in the Philosopher's Stone. Immortality could stave off death, but not the ravages of age. The handshake was gentle. A small, clear tone chimed somewhere inside Lucien's head. Ding! Loan triggered. Fragment of the Emerald Tablet, annual loan. The notification surprised him. The Emerald Tablet, legendary, Egyptian, foundational to alchemy, had provided only a fragment and issued as an annual loan. Lucien quickly scanned the loan's contents in his mind. Something to do with alchemy and potioncraft, a partial lending of knowledge tied to talent. He was half amused by the system's quirks when Nicholas's voice, soft but direct, interrupted him. "Child, your eyes are very special." Lucien snapped his attention back. Had Nicholas seen the eye of peering magic? The alchemist's gaze was the most penetrating Lucien had encountered. Centuries had honed it into uncanny insight. "No need to be nervous," Nicholas said with a faint chuckle. "It is rare these days for anyone to use such ancient arts to alter themselves." Ancient arts. Lucien thought of the description of his eye of peering magic, of transfigurations and potions, of alchemical methods woven through old tomes. For someone like Nicholas Flamel, who had lived through those centuries, such practices were not strange at all. The alchemist's knowledge predated many modern refinements and called some techniques commonplace that others considered arcane. Lucien's mind wandered for a moment. If such body-modifying magic had been known in ancient times, why did Nicholas keep an aged frame? With the power of alchemy at his disposal, why not smooth out the ravines of time and restore vigor? Nicholas seemed to read the question in his expression, and with a very small, almost rueful smile, answered before Lucien could speak. "I do miss the agility and strength of youth," he said, "but there is a different sort of richness in oldness. Fragility is a peculiar thing. It inclines one to notice the small, the fleeting. It changes how one experiences the world." Lucien considered the words. The alchemist who had brewed the elixir of life and guarded the philosopher's stone was not merely an immortal to be envied. He was a witness to time, and there was a gravity to that role that no youthful power could replace. Nicholas let go of Lucien's hand and regarded him more steadily. "Tell me, Lucien, what do you intend to seek in France?" Lucien straightened, the fragment's knowledge settling like a light warmth within his thoughts. Here, on a vessel crafted of impossible silver, in the presence of a legend, he felt both ridiculous and perfectly placed. "I came because Dumbledore suggested I visit," he said. "But if you ask, knowledge, transfiguration, alchemy, there is much I wish to learn." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Then we shall see what the old stones remember. The emerald tablet likes to share with those who show promise and caution." Lucien felt, beneath the alchemist's kindly manner, the quiet curiosity of a scholar as old as history itself. It was, he thought, a dangerous but irresistible invitation. Lucien listened with an odd mixture of deference and bafflement. Nicholas Flamel's words were measured, full of centuries of experience, and Lucien found it hard to grasp the mindset of a man who had lived for hundreds of years. Maybe if he lived that long, he would understand. "Your outlook is impressively broad," he said finally. "Enviable, even." Nicholas smiled at the compliment. "Anyone can reach that if they live long enough." He flipped his hand, and a small red gem hovered above his palm. It was crystal clear, radiating a faint magical light, a complete, concentrated source of magic. Lucien immediately noticed the quality. This philosopher's stone was different from the one Dumbledore had given him. It felt fuller, more perfect. "This is a philosopher's stone I just refined," Nicholas said. "It can turn lead to gold, and it can make the elixir of life." His eyes were intent on Lucien, making the offer explicit. Lucien kept his composure, but his gaze kept swinging between the stone and Nicholas. Dumbledore had given him one. Now Nicholas was offering another. These old men like dangling treasures in front of people, Lucien thought with a dry half-smile. Perhaps he'd be the same when he was old. "Mr. Nicholas," he said, "I'm very interested in the stone and its effects, but I'm even more curious about the knowledge needed to make it, and I'm especially curious about that spaceship. How much magical knowledge does it contain?" A light flared in Lucien's eyes. Seeing a Muggle-style spaceship in the wizarding world was irresistible. He wanted to know everything. What materials held such a structure together, the meaning of the runes on its hull, the source of its power. Nicholas watched him for a moment, then, pleased by the young man's sincerity, he let the philosopher's stone drift toward Lucien. Lucien caught it. "This is," he began, then trailed off. "Exploring magical knowledge on your own is a pleasure you can't replace," Nicholas said. "This one is for you. Don't worry, I'm not short of them." He touched the silver wall beside him. A panel eased out, revealing another gleaming philosopher's stone set into a recess. Lucien turned his head and his breath caught. Along the corridor there were more stones, arranged in a long sequence. No fewer than 20 were visible. The implication was staggering. The ship's power source was the stones themselves. Only the Philosopher's Stone could provide such an exaggerated supply of magic, and there were so many of them. "This ship is astonishing," Lucien murmured. "Practically the most complex alchemical work I've ever seen." Nicholas shook his head a little, a wistful sadness in his voice. "History of magic, yes. But the Muggles have had other wondrous things for over 20 years. Their machines can fly higher, much higher." Muggles? Over 20 years ago? Lucien's mind did a flip. Higher than this ship. Over 20 years ago, it suddenly landed on him, the Muggle moon landing. The idea that Nicholas, a legendary alchemist with centuries of wealth and knowledge, might have built a spaceship and then told the world his stone was destroyed and that he was dying, the notion was bizarre, almost mad. Yet when Lucien thought about the strange asymmetry between magical and Muggle technology, it made a certain sort of sense. Wizards had stolen an early lead in some fields, apparition, for example, while Muggles had advanced in other directions at an accelerated pace. Someone like Nicholas, driven to catch up with Muggles through alchemy, could very well attempt to push the boundaries of the skies. "Sorry, I got carried away," Nicholas said with a small laugh. "Come along, I'll show you the rest, and then we'll talk about the things you want to know." They walked. Nicholas had invited Lucien largely because both Dumbledore and Newt Scamander had written to him praising the young man. They'd also sent examples of Lucien's work, devices and alchemical tools. Nicholas had judged them not bad. For someone who'd been using magic for only a year, creating such instruments was impressive. It showed talent in alchemy, though Nicholas suspected Lucien's true genius lay elsewhere. There are no geniuses in every field, he thought as they moved through the ship. Magic is too broad. Spells, alchemy, potions, herbology, divination, transfiguration, dark arts. To reach the pinnacle in one area is rare. To apply that pinnacle to others, that is rarer still. If Lucien reached the heights of transfiguration, he could later push into alchemy and approach true genius. Nicholas was content to teach him what he could. He liked the boy, and he wasn't stingy with knowledge where he saw potential. They had barely finished touring when a voice carried out across the ship. "You can arrest me. It was I who killed her." The stage curtain fell. Lucien applauded. Not only the drama of the opera, but the performers themselves. Their lines, movements, and expressions had been flawless. What surprised Lucien most was what lay beneath. The black vortices that had filled the actors' eyes receded once they were off stage. Those on stage were not living people at all, but automatons, alchemical puppets. Without the eye of peering magic, they were indistinguishable from flesh and blood actors. "Lucien, what did you think of the performance?" An elderly woman asked softly from her velvet seat. "Madame Perenelle," Lucien replied, "it was magnificent. A sacrifice for freedom. Carmen refused to be tamed by love, even in death." The woman was Perenelle, Nicholas's wife, and a longtime enthusiast of opera. Both she and Nicholas had been hobbyists for centuries. They'd brought Lucien to tour the ship and had stumbled into Perenelle directing a rehearsal. They stayed to watch. Her eyes lit up at Lucien's familiarity with acting. "You studied acting?" she asked. "My family hired teachers, and I studied as well," Lucien said. "Would you like to rehearse with us?" Perenelle asked, delighted. "We can put on a scene and see how you fit with the automatons." "I would be honored to perform alongside alchemical automatons," Lucien answered easily, which made Perenelle beam and Nicholas chuckle. They continued the tour. The ship truly had everything. An opera house, a motion picture theater, a breeding farm, a factory. Automatons staffed the workers in every place, convenient, tireless, and requiring only magic to function. Lucien thought how useful such creations would be for managing a suitcase world like Newt's. No wages, no complaints, endless help. But creating them himself would be difficult. "You must be tired," Nicholas murmured after a while. "Chubby will show you to your room and see to you." With a small pop, a house elf appeared. He was as house elves usually were, small, bat-eared, eyes bulging, but he was neatly dressed in a little suit rather than a pillowcase or ragged sack. Lucien's eyebrows lifted. Did Nicholas clothe his house elves? Was this one free? The elf bowed. "Chubby serves, master and guests," he said. He had a courteous, lively manner that didn't sound servile. "If you need anything, say Chubby's name, and Chubby will come." "Thank you," Lucien said. "You needn't be so formal," Chubby replied, waving a hand. "This is only Chubby's duty. Chubby serves the master's guests gladly." Chubby chatted as he led Lucien along. "The master's guests are all good people. Once, someone carried a suitcase very like yours." Lucien glanced at his own suitcase and guessed the man Chubby meant, Newt. The elf seemed unusual in more ways than his clothes. He was well-spoken and proud, not cowering. "May Chubby ask you something?" he added. Lucien nodded. "Go ahead." "Do you like Chubby's clothes?" Chubby asked earnestly. They're very fine, Lucien said honestly. Well-fitting, decent. Chubby sighed with relief. Chubby chose them today. He straightened his little jacket. 600 years ago, my great-grandfather began serving the master. My grandfather did too. My father was given clothes and freedom by the master, but he went out and found dangerous people who tried to capture him and enslave him, so he came back. Fortunately, the master took him in, sheltered him, and even paid him wages. Chubby patted a coin in his pocket and produced a single galleon like a treasured prize. Chubby gets wages too. The master pays Chubby each month. Chubby can buy many new clothes. Lucien felt a small, impressed warmth. A house elf who was paid and clothed, who could choose his own garments, that was rare. Nicholas had freed and sheltered his house elves and paid them wages. He was a generous master. Still, free house elves like Chubby were few, and he had no intention of leaving Nicholas's side, so Lucien's chance to recruit one for himself was slim. Automata, then, seemed the more practical option, if he could master the difficult alchemy needed to create them. With the changes to talent brought by the emerald tablet fragments, perhaps the balance of possibility had shifted. 171. Fragments of the Emerald Jade Record. After Cupid left, Lucien opened his suitcase and stepped into the world within. He arrived in a barren desert layer, no other living thing around him. He summoned the system to check the loan details. Loan name, Emerald Tablet Fragment, annual loan. Repayment period, 365 days. Loan content, a stone tablet inscribed with 13 aphorisms symbolizing Hermes' magical talent. White magic, A+ dark arts, B+ defense against the dark arts, a transfiguration, S potion, S+ alchemy, SS+ magic power, A+. Loan task, in the host's name, sell 30,000 alchemical tools or potions, accumulating 150,000 galleons in profit. Lucien remembered the Emerald Tablet, an Egyptian stone tablet whose 13 aphorisms were said to be the origin of all alchemy, revealing its secrets. This Hermes wasn't the Greek messenger god, but the Egyptian pharaoh Hermes, who, together with his father Thoth and his son, the high priest Tat, formed a trinity regarded as the god Hermes. Logically, this should be a god-level magical talent, like Loki's Faceless, but Lucien didn't see an SSS-level god talent. The highest here was SS+ in alchemy. Was it because this was only a fragment? That would explain the reduced ranks. Still, the other talents weren't very high either, which didn't sit right for something that was supposed to be the origin of alchemy. System, if I merge this talent block, will it affect my existing talents? He asked. System, host merges multiple talent blocks. Lower-level talents will be overwritten by higher-level talents and will not stack for upgrades. Overwritten by higher talents, that was good. Lucien pulled up his current talent template. White magic, S dark arts, SS+, defense against the dark arts, S+ transfiguration, SSS potion, A alchemy, A+, magic power SS. If he merged the Emerald Tablet fragment, both the potion and alchemy talents would rise and patch his weak points. The rest would still be dominated by Loki's Faceless. The loan task, though, in my name, required clarification. The system replied. System, these alchemical tools or potions must be personally developed by the host. Production and sales can be handled by others, but buyers must know that the inventor is the host. In short, the host must be the researcher and can only sell products he invented. 30,000 units and 150,000 galleons. Wizards were fewer than 1/10,000th of humanity. Britain had under 4,000 wizards, and worldwide there were perhaps 200,000, 300,000 at most. So 30,000 units, about 10 items per wizard in Britain, meant Britain alone wouldn't suffice. He'd have to expand abroad. 150,000 galleons averaged to 5 galleons per item. 5 galleons wasn't cheap. Ollivander's wands were only 7 galleons, but quantity and revenue could be separated. Cheap, common items could boost numbers. Expensive items could boost profit. He could launch different products for different markets. The loan didn't require selling only one kind of product. As long as his alchemical tools and potions were his own designs and appealed to various customer groups, it was doable. With S+ potion talent and SS+ alchemy talent, his research wouldn't be a problem. Production and sales, the supply chain, raw materials, processing were the challenge. Lucien smiled bitterly. It was almost like returning to his family's old trade. He hadn't expected to go back to that profession even in the magical world. But he wanted those talent improvements badly. He suspected the emerald tablet fragment could be completed, and this annual loan might be a starting point. SS plus alchemy had potential to be upgraded to SSS, the god level. He'd already experienced how invaluable an SSS level talent could be when learning and mastering knowledge. This loan's tasks could also improve his alchemy and potion skills, learning and earning at once. Annual loans appeared only 2 or 3 times a year at most. He should seize the opportunity. "System, I want to borrow the Emerald Tablet Fragment, annual loan," he said. Ding! The application was accepted. Evaluation. The source of all perfection in the world is here. A solid gem-like tablet materialized before him. It was composed entirely of emerald, with neat characters carved across its surface. But the tablet wasn't whole. Huge cracks cleaved it, and many of the characters were missing. The characters were Latin, and the aphorisms Lucien could still make out included, "True without falsehood, never lying, it will bring truth. All things are one, created from the one through differentiation. The sun is its father, the moon its mother, the wind carried it in its womb, the earth nourished it." Just reading the words eased some of Lucien's alchemical puzzles. He reached out slowly and touched the translucent fragment with his right fingertips. In an instant, the emerald tablet burst silently, dissolving into billions of points of dazzling stardust like a disturbed green dream. Before he could react, the flowing emerald dust, alive almost, slithered down his fingers and rapidly coated his entire right hand. A clear, vibrant emerald light then bloomed from his palm. It shot upward and transformed into a towering, ancient tree with lush branches and leaves in the middle of the desert. The light-wrought branches swayed in the void, illuminating the sand like a secret garden where a divine miracle had descended. 172. New talent. Nico's surprise. The desert layer of the box world. Lucien looked up at the emerald-green giant tree that had solidified into reality. He withdrew his right hand from the tree's surface. A shower of debris and dust fell to the sand. On his palm, a verdant pattern had formed, like a miniature version of the giant tree, but incomplete, roots, trunk, and branches all fragmented. Alchemy. Lucien went over the steps and the elements of his loan repayment task. Within 1 year, he needed to sell a total of 30,000 alchemy tools or potions, bringing in 150,000 galleons. First, he had to focus on quality and output, then work on distribution. Production was the immediate problem. Whether potions or alchemy items, both required heavy upfront investment. Fortunately, his family fortune would cover the start. Once the products turned into profit, the cycle could expand. He also had to consider promotion, quickly building a reputation. His thoughts jumped to the transfiguration thesis Dumbledore had asked him to write. If his thesis could gain fame in the magical community, it would only help sell his products. The product's reputation and its inventor's name would reinforce each other. He needed to accelerate the thesis. Making alchemy tools and brewing potions would also require manpower. Lucien couldn't do it all himself. He needed lots of people. Wizards? Goblins? Money wasn't the issue, but skilled labor for fine craft was scarce. He thought of puppets. After seeing Nicholas's ship, he'd noticed several types of alchemy puppets, delicate ones for stage work, and simpler, more numerous ones for repetitive labor in factories and farms. If he could build puppets to help with production. As soon as the idea arrived, all the bits of knowledge he'd gathered, alchemy, charms, transfiguration, potions, seemed to snap into place. Inspirations collided and creation sparked. Problems that had stumped him smoothed out. Right, the materials, the structure, and the energy source for the puppets. One by one, magic materials rose from Lucien's pockets and hovered. Finally, a crystal-clear ruby floated into the air. Lucien touched the new Philosopher's Stone with his wand. A soft magical glow spread. Nicholas set down his wand and regarded the full-body suit before him. A muggle spacesuit. It looks like this. But with the conveniences of magic and alchemy, there's no need for it to be so bulky. I can refine it. Nicholas waved his wand again and began adjusting the magical version of a spacesuit. He didn't work for long before settling back on the sofa. It wasn't that he lacked magic. His problem was energy. The elixir of life, refined from the Philosopher's Stone, could stave off death, but couldn't restore vitality. His body's ongoing aging had left his energy levels poor. He worked for a while, then rested, his rests often longer than his working stretches. But Nicholas was patient. He had lived for hundreds of years. He had plenty of time. Master, young Master Lucien said he wants to ask you something. Queenie's voice came over the intercom. All right, bring him in. The next second, Queenie apparated Lucien directly into the room. She bowed quickly and disappeared. Lucien noticed a white, full-body suit sitting nearby. It looked very much like a spacesuit, lighter than a Muggle model, clearly enhanced by magic. Nicholas really wanted to see outer space. Lucien bowed. Good afternoon, Mr. Nicholas. Nicholas nodded. Queenie said you have something to ask. Yes, I saw you have a lot of alchemy puppets here, and I want to try making some myself, but I've hit a few problems. Nicholas found Lucien's curiosity natural. The boy liked exploring new things. He had expected questions about how the puppets worked, material transfiguration, structural mechanics. If Lucien wanted to try, Nicholas planned to give him practical guidance. Creating simple limbs or basic models would be a useful alchemy exercise. I want to use a philosopher's stone as the energy source, Lucien said. But I don't know if it's a rune problem or a material flaw. The magic seems to dissipate too much. And the puppet's consciousness module can follow simple commands, but more complex ones cause errors. Nicholas frowned, thinking the boy might be aiming too high. Alchemy required care and steady steps. He was about to advise patience when Lucien reached into his pocket and produced a silver-white puppet. A philosopher's stone was embedded in its chest, magic flowing through tiny conduits like blood through veins. Lucien tapped the puppet with his wand. It sprang to life, jumping and running with smooth, lively movements. He stopped it, lifted the chest casing, and revealed the conduits inside. You see, magic dissipates a lot here, and here, and here. Lucien tapped spots along the network. But other parts don't have this problem, so Nicholas had stood up without realizing it, eyes fixed on the puppet. Your materials are too good, he said. You don't need things like soft silver amethyst. Brass soaked in hippogriff fluid will do. This puppet, did you make it? He asked. Yes, I thought a philosopher's stone would be an ideal energy source. Its magic is extremely pure and needs little conversion for many functions. Nicholas moved closer to inspect. With his expertise, he could pinpoint many faults, but also many strengths. Lucien's foundation in alchemy was solid, if not systematic. That explained a few imperfect details. Those could be fixed with more learning and practice. But there was something far more valuable that Nicholas could not teach: talent. Lucien had a spark, a natural sense of the craft that set his work apart. Nicholas's gaze shifted from the puppet to Lucien. He felt a strange suspicion. Had Albus and Newt deliberately concealed Lucien's real abilities from him? Or had they been saving up a surprise for this very moment? Either way, the boy before him was more than simply promising. He was unexpectedly gifted. Inside Nicholas's workshop, under the legendary alchemist's guidance, Lucien was correcting the doll's imperfections. Yes, remove 1 ring of energy-gathering runes here, replace it with 1.5 rings of magic transfer runes, and then refine the components with mithril. Its conductivity is excellent. After Nicholas explained, Lucien quickly understood and put it into practice. Then, at the transmission end, on the slimmer magic conduit, should I reduce the rune stacking? And what about the material's properties? Lucien's ability to generalize from a single example pleased Nicholas. He wasn't merely copying instructions. He kept his mind active, adapting and adding his own ideas to the experiment. Very good, Lucien. You learn quickly. What alchemy books have you read so far? There aren't many alchemy books on the market. I found most of mine in the Hogwarts library. Alchemy for Beginners, Principles of Material Transformation, The Magic of Equivalent Exchange. Lucien listed more than 20 titles. Last year he hadn't focused on alchemy, so his reading was limited. It's right to build a solid foundation first. Most of those were recommended by Albus, weren't they? Nicholas asked. Lucien nodded. Nicholas told him to put the doll away, then spoke a word whose pronunciation Lucien couldn't place. The floor lit with glowing runes, and a beam of magic rose up, surrounding them. When the light faded, the cramped magic space had disappeared, replaced by rows of towering bookshelves full of ancient and modern tomes. The runes had formed a teleportation circle faster and more comfortable than flue powder. Another kind of ancient magic, then. As a wizard who had lived for centuries, Nicholas's knowledge was vast indeed. "Want to learn the circle I used just now?" Nicholas asked. "Yes," Lucien replied without hesitation, his longing for knowledge plain. Nicholas smiled. He loved that Lucien combined talent with curiosity. Many gifted youngsters grew complacent, but Lucien kept pushing himself. He waved, and a beautifully bound volume drifted from a shelf. Lucien took in the library. It was larger than Hogwarts's, a sea of books. He thought, not for the first time, that centuries of life allowed one to collect many things. "This is ancient Hebrew," Nicholas said, letting the book hover before Lucien. "You should start with this. It's the foundation for learning that kind of teleportation circle and the script commonly used in older alchemical texts." Lucien thanked him. Nicholas had casually picked a rare treasure. Alchemy was hard to learn, not only because it required resources and time, but because much of its knowledge was preserved in ancient scripts. Modern writing often failed to convey the precise formulas and spells. Nicholas conjured a blackboard and desks, then set to teaching. He summoned any appropriate materials from his shelves and explained concepts clearly, plugging gaps in Lucien's knowledge and strengthening his foundations. Lucien absorbed everything like a sponge. Opportunities to study with a master alchemist were rare. Nicholas, despite being over 600 years old, taught without stiffness. He could make complex ideas accessible. As he taught, Nicholas became increasingly satisfied. It had been a long time since he had instructed anyone like this. The last might have been over a century ago. Through teaching, Nicholas came to appreciate Lucien's talent more fully. A genuine prodigy. What surprised him even more was Lucien's breadth. Alchemy draws on many branches of magic, and true mastery demands aptitude across them. Nicholas had feared that Lucien might lack proficiency in charms, potions, or transfiguration, and require extra help, but his worries evaporated. Lucien stayed with Nicholas for a while, and his days fell into a steady routine. Mornings were for transfiguration essays or developing alchemical tools and potions. Afternoons were lessons with Nicholas. Evenings were either continued work or leisure with Nicholas and Perenelle, attending operas and the like. Time, full and busy, passed briskly. After more than half a month, they learned each other's rhythms. Then one afternoon they played wizard's chess. "Beauxbatons offers alchemy in third year? That early?" Lucien asked in surprise. Beauxbatons, one of the great European schools alongside Hogwarts and Durmstrang, apparently made alchemy compulsory by the third year. "Thanks," Nicholas explained, in part to his own funding and guidance. "I helped them build their alchemy program," Nicholas said, "but the threshold for advanced study is still high." "That explains it," Lucien said. Nicholas glanced at the board, considering his next move, and in a teasing aside, whether there might be a chance to cheat a piece. "Beauxbatons has a lot of pretty girls, too," he added with a laugh. "I built a beauty fountain there. Heh, you won't be short of sights." "I'm here to study, not look," Lucien replied, focused on the game. "By the way, how does your beauty fountain work? Finish the game, and I'll tell you tomorrow." Nicholas pretended to pout at Lucien's single-mindedness. Then, quietly and casually, Nicholas said, "Lucien, do you want to be my student?" Lucien looked up in astonishment. Nicholas's tone was relaxed, almost as if asking what he wanted for dinner, but his eyes were serious. To be Nicholas Flamel's student, to study under the living legend, the pinnacle of alchemy, was overwhelming even for Lucien, who usually kept his composure. His heart stirred. Nicholas saw the mix of disbelief and hope on Lucien's face and smiled gently. "Don't be nervous. We'll have a teacher-student relationship, nothing as formal or as strict as ancient master-disciple ties. I can see you want to learn, and you are capable of learning a great deal. It won't be limited to alchemy. I simply want to pass on what I know." Nicholas had been thinking in recent days. He'd toyed with the idea of flying into what Muggles called space to see the moon, but a nagging concern remained: the continuity of his life's work. Over centuries, he'd had children, descendants, many apprentices and students, yet alchemy demanded such talent and breadth of aptitude that he had never found a true successor. He had been stooping toward the idea of leaving the field behind. But then Lucien came, recommended by Albus and Newt. In the time they'd spent together, Nicholas had seen not only talent, but hunger and character. Hope returned. Perhaps at last there was someone to carry his legacy. Lucien's answer came swiftly and without hesitation. There was no real question. A mentor is crucial in alchemy. Without one, a student can wander into dead ends and false paths, no matter the raw talent. It would be my honor. Teacher, Lucien added. Hearing the word, Nicholas relaxed completely. Good. Let's finish the game, then go eat. Nicholas was pleased. Perhaps he could delay his moonflight a little longer. He had all the time in the world to teach Lucien everything he knew. The secrets of the Philosopher's Stone, the refinement of the elixir of life, even lost, ancient magics. Pleased, Lucien bent his head to the chessboard, but something was off. The pieces weren't arranged as they had been a moment ago. Elsewhere in France, a slender, graceful young woman paced nervously. Golden hair framed an astonishingly beautiful face, and a faint silver light seemed to flow from her skin. "Professor Maxime, am I ready for this?" she asked. "You've met Mr. Flamel before, and you left a good impression," Olympe Maxime, the tall principal of Beauxbaton, reassured her. "There's a good chance today. You are the most talented alchemy student Beauxbatons has had in a century. Show him your best." Even a nominal connection to Nicolas Flamel could make mouths water among the wizarding world, an opportunity that rarely came. Maxime looked up as a silver craft cut through the clouds, marveling at Nicolas Flamel's wild imagination. A beam of light enveloped them and gently guided them to the craft. Inside, they saw Nicolas Flamel with a young man. Nicolas patted the young man's shoulder. Sensing someone watching, the young man glanced over. Fleur only noticed a pair of dark green eyes before he was teleported away. She was curious about him, but followed Maxime to greet Nicolas politely. After exchanging courtesies, Maxime asked casually, "Mr. Flamel, who was that child just now?" A smile touched Nicolas's lips. "That's my student, my last one." 174, Rejuvenation Potion. The pale shaft of light faded. Maxime and Fleur stepped out and walked toward a carriage drawn by elephant-sized Abraxans, golden-bodied, silver-maned, crimson-eyed. After they settled in, Maxime noticed the quiet disappointment in Fleur's eyes and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. We arrived too late." Fleur forced a smile and regained her usual composure. "It's good that Mr. Flamel found a pupil he likes. But, that young wizard, doesn't he seem awfully young?" Maxime glanced at the landscape slipping past the window. "Yes, he looks very young. He should still be at school, probably Hogwarts or Durmstrang." "You want to meet him?" Fleur didn't deny it. Of course she wanted to know what kind of prodigy would be taken as Nicolas Flamel's private pupil. Maxime stroked her hair. "There'll be a chance. He must be remarkable. He'll likely enter that ancient competition." Speaking of which, preparations can begin soon. After seeing them off, Nicolas finally unclenched his stiff neck. "Getting old, aren't I?" Fleur had indeed been an excellent candidate for alchemy. Had he not taken on Lucien, Nicolas might very well have considered her as a pupil. But there is no if. Teaching Lucien had only confirmed that his choice was right. The boy learned astonishingly fast and absorbed more than Nicolas had expected. "Master, young Master Lucien left some things in his room, and a letter," Cuppy said, apparating in with respectful deference. Nicolas frowned. Lucien hadn't mentioned that, and followed Cuppy to the boy's former room. On the desk sat 2 crystal bottles and a thick stack of papers. Nicolas waved a hand, and the letter, wedged beneath the bottles, floated gently into his palm. "Teacher," it read in Lucien's neat hand, "these papers contain some aerospace data from that Eastern European country before its dissolution. My family collected some of it. I thought it might offer a little inspiration for your work." Nicolas's brows twitched. He had not expected such a gift from his student. He read on. "Teacher, the liquid in the crystal bottles is Vitality Rejuvenation, a potion I have only just perfected. It replenishes life force. I hope you and my teacher's wife will like it." The paper shook in Nicolas's fingers. Replenish life force. 5 simple words, but their weight hit him like thunder. After 600 years, his heart still quickened at the thought. He knew Lucien's character well enough to trust that the boy would not boast. Nicolas set the letter down and moved toward the desk almost without realizing it. As he drew near, a yearning rose from the depths of his weary bones, soft and irresistible. He reached out with trembling, withered fingers and lifted one of the crystal bottles, easing the stopper free. At once a fresh scent, rain-soaked grass burst forth. An invisible, immense vitality poured from the bottle like water, making the quiet air seem to breathe. Nicholas inhaled. Every cell in his spent body seemed to sing, drawn to the intoxicating sweetness of the essence of life. Even without tasting it, he could tell this potion would do exactly as Lucien claimed. It would restore vital force in abundance. "My child," Nicholas murmured, clutching the bottle. He had accepted the limits of age, taught himself to be cheerful within a fragile frame, but who could forget the vigor of youth? He and Perenelle were decrepit, bones thin as dry twigs, meals reduced to specially prepared liquids, even Cuppy's legendary culinary skill unable to shine at their table. Lucien's arrival had brought energy back to the house and given Cuppy a chance to show his talent. Nicholas remembered joking at dinner one evening that watching the young enjoy good food had awakened his appetite. Lucien had listened thoughtfully, and Nicholas had noticed a small line added at the bottom of the letter. "Teacher, Cuppy's cooking is excellent, and he regrets not being able to present you and my teacher's wife with the meals his ancestors once could. Besides, a vigorous body might be more fitting for exploring the wonders of the world." "The wonders of the world," Nicholas echoed, then laughed, a sound that startled him and shook his frail chest. The laughter turned into an awkward coughing fit, but he didn't stop. He tipped his head back and drank the shimmering liquid. Warm vitality surged from his stomach like a tide, washing away years of wear. A gentle tide, but enormous. Nicholas felt time slip at the edges. Across town, Lucien was contemplating his last days of summer. He'd assumed his teacher would find what he'd left behind. Muggle aerospace tech and magic were different worlds, but the papers might spark an idea. He'd had an aunt watch that region. Some of the legacy had indeed come into his hands. "Thank you, Glimmer," he said, rubbing the shrunken little Keelan in his arms. The creature had even given a little of its blood to the refinement of the vitality rejuvenation potion. "Master, more sweets?" Glimmer piped, rattling off a menu: lemon sherbet, licorice wands, and cockroach clusters he had once had at the principal's house. Lucien shook his head, but pulled a handful of candies from his pocket anyway. "Try a bit of each. Don't eat too fast. Cavities hurt." Keelan probably didn't get cavities, but warning it was part of the fun. Glimmer nuzzled him and snatched the sweets. In the weeks since his potion skill had improved, Lucien had studied Nicholas's library and learned to refine potions with Cheelan blood, no longer merely mixing ingredients, but amplifying the life-rich properties of Cheelan essence. Nicholas had taught him everything, and Lucien wanted to give back. Tomorrow he'd send some samples to Newt and Tina. Newt, who spent his life with magical creatures and had a knack for getting into trouble, could use a boost. Newt respected him, offered advice, and had given him a case. Lucien would not let his friends or family down. "Oh, system, this vitality rejuvenation is my invention. If I sell it, will it count toward the loan mission?" A potion that truly restored life would fetch any price. Quantity aside, revenue could quickly meet the target. Host, you see," the system stammered, hesitant. Lucien understood from the tone. Never mind, he'd proceed as he wished. He had designed alchemical tools and made samples. Next came finding a distributor. Grafton Manor. Lucien rechecked the first drafts of 2 transfiguration essays: Transfiguration Superposition, Construction and Maintenance of Composite Biological Structures, and Research on Transfiguration based on Magical Circuit Theory. He made 3 copies of each, one for Dumbledore, one for Professor McGonagall, and one for Nicholas. Nicholas had asked for a copy when they were finished. Lucien would not forget. He'd spent most of the summer at home. As promised, he'd gone with Malfoy to the Dragon Reserve, but there were too few Norwegian Ridgebacks. He'd let Norbert out at night to practice with the others. The skirmish ended quickly. Lucien healed and fed the dragons afterwards and used magic to conceal the episode. Between hatching eggs with Keelan Pure Fire and the bone and blood cleansing fluid he'd developed, Norbert's growth and strength surprised even Lucien. A few days ago, he'd turned 12 and held a birthday party. Friends from the Muggle and Wizarding worlds had come with many gifts. The rest of his time had gone into finishing the essays, which Dumbledore and McGonagall expected to review within 6 months, and they were likely to publish them in the authoritative journal Transfiguration Today. His fingers tapped the desk as his thoughts drifted further afield. Publication would cement his reputation. Since the system demanded he sell alchemical and potion products under his own name, the inventor's reputation mattered as much as product quality. Fame and wares fed one another. Clang! A crash jolted him from his reverie. Without needing to look, Lucien knew what had happened. He drew his wand and, with a flick, opened the window. He wasn't worried about breaking the trace. Nicholas had taught him a simple ancient charm that masked such magic. He dragged the fainted owl inside. It floated onto the desk, dusty and sickly. It was Errol, the Weasleys' old, muddled owl. When delivering letters, Errol missed the window 8 out of 10 times, hit a wall the other 2, and often arrived in less than graceful shape. Lucien cast a healing charm, and then a reviving charm. Thanks to the blessing of unicorn blood in his training, his charms were particularly effective. Errol blinked awake, handed over the letter, and then stood there with a blank look, only remembering to eat when Lucien fed it directly. Lucien wondered, half amused, whether he should invent a potion for animal dementia. The letter read, "Dear young Master Lucien, we wonder when you will grace our humble abode. We await your esteemed presence at the Burrow, Ottery St. Catchpole." The teasing tone and the small smiley face at the end made Lucien smile. It was clearly the twins. Time to visit the Weasleys, then. After a ride on the night bus, Lucien arrived in Ottery St. Catchpole, Devon, and soon found the Burrow. The crooked house sat by a pond, surrounded by small fields and pastures. It looked pieced together from mismatched parts and should have collapsed without magic, but that ragged charm and lively warmth were exactly what made it the Weasleys. "Lucien!" Ron, mid-gnoming in the garden, looked up and was surprised to see him. He spun a gnome in his hands, its muffled cries of, let me go," trailing behind, and tossed it out, vaulting the fence to run over. He started to hug Lucien, but stopped awkwardly when he remembered he was covered in mud. Lucien didn't mind. He stepped forward and hugged Ron first. Long time no see. Ron visibly relaxed. He'd been shocked by Lucien's birthday party and the glimpse into his impressive connections, but Lucien's easy manner reassured him. Lucien had always been approachable in their everyday interactions, well, except during tutoring sessions. "Oh, if it isn't young Master Lucien, welcome!" Fred and George called with grins as they finished work on the other side of the garden. They strolled over, ever playful. "Hello, Lucien." Ginny came too, quieter than the others, but darting curious looks toward Lucien's pocket, as if expecting something fluffy and platinum blonde to poke its head out and greet her. 175, Gemini's prank the Burrow. Around the long, rickety dining table, Lucien sat with several members of the Weasley family, their plates piled high with a hearty meal. "Come on, dear, try another helping," Molly Weasley said, spooning a generous portion of stew onto Lucien's plate. Her face glowed with that fierce, homely pride. Lucien swallowed the rich, tender stew and looked up with genuine appreciation. "Mrs. Weasley, it's wonderful, really satisfying." It wasn't just politeness. Molly ran a bustling household with magic every day. Her cooking might not be restaurant fine, but it had that unmistakable warmth. "Oh, that's good to hear," Molly beamed. Around the table, George and Fred were trying to flick a pea onto Ron's nose until Mrs. Weasley's accusing look stopped them. The meal was relaxed and pleasant. Lucien's gaze drifted to the clock on the wall. Not a normal clock, but one with 9 hands, each tipped with a tiny likeness of a Weasley family member. At that moment, every hand except Arthur's, Mr. Weasley, who was at work, and Bill and Charlie's pointed to home. The other positions read school, dentist, prison, missing, Quidditch match, and the like. Prison. Lucien suppressed a smile. His mind cataloged the clock as a clever piece of practical magic, an alchemical contract device that assigned tracking pointers to family members. Interesting. He made a note to study the mechanism later. He had the materials now, thanks to the astonishing package Nicholas Flamel had sent him for his birthday. The gift had contained rare, exotic supplies and reliable supplier contacts, an alchemist's dream, and a steady procurement channel. After lunch, the twins invited Lucien to their room. Fred and George, one on either side, led him up the stairs, with Ron tagging along because he'd seen that familiar mischievous grin on his brothers' faces. "Hope you like it here," one of them said. "We've prepared a proper Weasley welcome for you." Lucien smiled and stepped into the room. A stationary kettle on the doorframe suddenly tipped and sprayed a beam of dye intended to turn someone's hair bright green. The beam hit the glimmering button on Lucien's jacket and ricocheted with a soft pop, landing squarely on one of the twins. Red hair flared into a furious shade of green. A harmless-looking broom swept suddenly from the corner toward Lucien's calf. He didn't even glance at it. A delicate silver bracelet beneath his cuff flashed and produced an invisible cushion. The broom struck nothing and bounced into the corner, shuddering with a mechanical cackle. The whole thing took 2 or 3 seconds. Lucien's step never faltered, as if he'd only climbed a couple of stairs during a stroll. Ron, watching behind him, gaped in admiration and envy. The twins' pranks usually made him the test subject. "George, your hair looks green," Ron laughed. "Ronnie, you're mistaken. I'm Fred," the dyed twin protested. "And who am I?" the other retorted. Before another argument could start, Lucien flicked his wand and restored one of the twins' strands to red. Then he got to the point. "I'd like to ask a favor. I've got some small gadgets. After term starts, could you help me sell them?" He produced several alchemical items and potions, practical student-focused devices, including some that triggered defensive charms. Lucien wanted the twins to sell the lighter stuff to their peers. The more dangerous items he had other plans for. He'd asked them because they were popular at Hogwarts and knew how the students thought. Fred and George's eyes lit up at the sight of the things he'd just used. These are great, but do you also have," lowering his voice, "the sort that liven things up? Make people laugh?" Fred finished with a grin. Lucien suppressed a twitch of amusement. He'd expected them to ask about prank items. From a small box, he produced 5 or 6 more vials and a handful of bright sugar-coated rounds. "Lemon snow sugar," he said, showing them a yellow candy. "It's an alchemical confedo. It causes a mild transfiguration when consumed. Flavor and appearance can be tuned. You want to try one?" The twins' faces were instant eagerness. One reached for a candy. The other, quicker, pushed forward and shoved a piece into Ron's mouth. Ron's eyes widened. "Oi!" At the doorway, Ginny called up. "Mum asked me to bring tea and biscuits." "Ah, Mum! George and they've got a bear!" Ginny's cry echoed up the stairs. Molly hurried up to check. She found the twins with arms slung around each other's shoulders and the room apparently in order. "Ginny, you said there was a bear?" Ginny shook her head, cheeks pink. "No, Mum, my mistake. It was just a joke Fred and George made." Molly shot the twins a look, then softened and turned to Lucien. "They didn't frighten you, did they? You're old enough to be more steady than that." Fred and George shuffled guiltily, glancing at floor and ceiling. "It's fine, Mrs. Weasley. They're only pranks. We find them amusing." Molly gave Lucien one more warm look. "If you want anything else to eat or drink, just say. Treat this like your home." "Thank you, Auntie," Lucien said. As soon as Molly left, Fred and George exhaled in unison and gave Lucien triumphant thumbs up. "Your transfiguration candy is brilliant." "You've got ideas," Fred said, and dragged Ron from behind the bed, clapping his shoulder. Ron swatted the hand away, rubbing at the rough patch of fur now clinging to his cheek. The candy had transformed him into a plump little bear that could only roar, much to Ginny's alarm when she'd first walked in. After Lucien reversed the effect, Ron saw Ginny cradling a small, plump, platinum-colored creature that looked like a mole, far cuter than Scabbers. After a few hushed words, Ginny agreed to cover for them. She'd already melted into adoration for the creature, utterly unbothered by what her brothers were up to. "Lucien, we can help you sell," Fred said, flopping onto the bed and trapping Lucien between them. "You're Ron's friend. He's our dear brother." "Our only brother," George added, which made Ron frown. The brothers had a strange way of showing affection. "Could you teach us how to make these?" Fred asked, rubbing his hands together. "We won't learn for nothing." Lucien, prepared for this, took out 2 papers and handed each twin a copy. "These are the terms and profit-sharing details. Read them over." Fred and George, delighted by the formality, began to read. The contract spelled out that the twins would handle sales and pricing, subject to Lucien's approval. They could either buy finished goods from him or take raw materials and process them themselves, the latter earning higher pay. The idea of making their own stock appealed strongly. The twins had been planning to open a shop after graduation. They wanted freedom, not a 9-to-5 for someone else. Lucien's offer was a way to practice now with a decent return. "You didn't make a mistake with the pay, did you?" George asked, incredulous and hopeful. "Of course not. Friendship is friendship, business is business," Lucien said. "You know Hogwarts and the students. You're perfect for selling and pricing. Don't worry, the more you sell, the more you make. This is a written agreement, so we keep to the spirit of it." The twins exchanged looks that said, "What are you waiting for?" Then, in exaggerated showmanship, they chorused, "It's an honor to serve you, Boss Lucien." Ron, curious, leaned in to see the contract. The twins snatched it up, signed it with Lucien, and locked it in a small box with ceremony. Lucien smiled. Sales needed people who loved the show. He knew that. At Hogwarts, most students had limited pocket money. The right strategy was low margins and high volume. That was why he'd chosen the Weasleys. They knew the market and could steer pricing to squeeze the students' small purses without driving them away. For wealthier purebloods, higher-end products would be offered. The twins' popularity was itself a marketing channel, and Lucien planned to recruit other well-known students too. He wasn't offering bad compensation. He wanted scale. If profits covered costs and turned a little surplus, he could reinvest in incentives. He wasn't short of capital either. If the system hadn't closed certain loopholes, he could have hit targets by throwing money around. Still, Hogwarts was only one avenue. He needed to reach a sales quantity of 30,000 and a total of 150,000 galleons. He'd have to spread beyond school, through Diagon Alley and the wider wizarding world. "I'll go to Diagon Alley in a few days," he thought. "There are things to arrange in advance." 176. Transform flying cars, the Burrows Shed. "Lucien, Muggles have a box that makes ice cubes all by itself without a freezing charm. Isn't that marvelous? Do they keep a little docile frost elf inside? Would it need feeding?" There aren't any frost elves. The principle is..." Mr. Arthur Weasley chattered on about Muggle life while tinkering with a car. As usual, he supplied the questions and Lucien supplied the explanations. Mr. Weasley's curiosity was endless, and Lucien kept trying to link Muggle technology to magic so the explanations would make sense. "And Muggles have something that doesn't need owls. Just press some buttons and you can speak to someone far away." "What is that exactly?" When Lucien realized Mr. Weasley meant a mobile phone, he described its functions and let his thoughts wander. The wizarding world still relied on letters and owls for most communication. Why not create more efficient means? If the range of sound-transmitting charms could be extended, image transmission would follow. The underlying principles were not that different. Magic might leapfrog many of the small, incremental steps Muggles had to take. If magical communication devices could be made affordably, they would sell like wildfire, though owls might lose work, or at least be relegated to parcel delivery. Lost in these ideas, Lucien refocused on the car. Mr. Weasley had invited him to help transform a rusty old Muggle vehicle into something that did a little more than roll. "Oh, flying is so handy. Why don't Muggles give their cars that ability?" Mr. Weasley grumbled. Lucien's lips twitched. What Mr. Weasley described sounded an awful lot like an airplane, but he kept that to himself. They stripped out the bulky, useless parts. Mr. Weasley grafted in alchemical components, while Lucien drew magical glyphs. "Ron told me you've been studying alchemy, Lucien, so I thought you'd like this," Mr. Weasley said. "Also, thanks for helping Ron with his lessons. That boy used to be a right headache." Lucien made a few adjustments and listened as Mr. Weasley rambled on about his office work. "I've been inspecting wizarding homes. My job at the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office is to stop people enchanting Muggle-made things in case they fall back into Muggle hands." The more Lucien listened, the stranger it sounded. He thought, "No, aren't you supposed to be prohibiting this?" Yet here they were, surrounded by enchanted Muggle items and modifying a car. Lucien glanced around the shed. It was piled high with Muggle things, most of them touched by magic. Didn't Mr. Weasley have colleagues? Wouldn't they be horrified? He kept his doubts to himself and watched the car take shape, then realized something. "I feel like something's still missing." Mr. R. Weasley stroked his chin and inspected the nearly finished vehicle. Lucien suggested, "Perhaps an invisibility charm? Muggle cars don't usually fly around in plain sight." "Oh, of course. Thank you for the reminder, Lucien," Mr. Weasley brightened. After he cast the invisibility charm, Lucien added a small magic circle to it. "What's this?" Mr. Weasley peered at the runes. "It's a magic circle to trigger the spell automatically," Lucien explained. "I've set it so the moment the car starts flying, the invisibility activates too. That way muggles won't see it in the air, and that would be troublesome." Mr. Weasley slapped his forehead in delight. "You're right. You young people are so clever." As Mr. Weasley was about to leave the shed, he leaned in and added hurriedly, "Lucien, don't tell Molly about this car. She doesn't like me tinkering with her things." Lucien nodded. He didn't need to tell her. Someone would be riding in this flying car soon enough. He tucked the Niffler, Gingy, back under his arm. Ginny had borrowed him for a few days, and knocked on Ginny's door. The door clicked open, and Lucien found not Ginny, but a girl he didn't recognize. Pale skin, dark blonde hair, startling silver eyes that made her look perpetually surprised, and very faint eyebrows. She wore radish-shaped earrings and a necklace strung with butterbeer bottle caps. Even before anyone said her name, Lucien had a guess. "Oh, Lucien," Ginny said, hugging the Niffler and introducing the girl. "This is Luna. Luna Lovegood. Her family lives in the village, our neighbors. Her father edits the Quibbler, a paper that records rare things." So it was Luna. Lucien had heard of her, eccentric, said to see things others couldn't. He offered a polite greeting. "Hello, Luna. I'm Lucien Grafton." Luna's silver eyes slid over him with the same dreamy blankness. Then, in a leisurely voice, she observed, "You are so special." "Special?" Lucien blinked. They had just met. "Why say that?" He asked gently. "Luna, why do you think I'm special?" Luna tilted her head and scanned him again. "Oh, there aren't any rackspurts around you. How magical. I've never seen that before." Rackspurts? In Lucien's mind, Luna was already loony, odd, possibly clairvoyant, and prone to saying strange things. She must be seeing something he couldn't. Luna nodded, stepped closer, and put her small hands up to his ears as if fanning them. "Rackspurts are invisible. They float into your ears and muddle your brain. It's curious. You were worrying a moment ago, and yet you don't attract them." She pinched her fingers together as if catching an invisible insect. "See, even if I put a rackspurt near you, it tries to escape." As she brought her imaginary pinched bug close to him, a slow swirl seemed to appear in Lucien's vision, vortices blackening the edges of his sight. But there was nothing physical. The eye of peering magic registered no trace of magic. Luna truly was strange. Then she added with sudden cheer, "Oh, they're all gone. Poof! Did you eat them?" Her vacant gaze brightened as she walked around him, peering past him for things he couldn't see. Did she mean the things he carried with him? The thought hit Lucien hard. His soul, somehow from another world, might be the peculiar thing Luna perceived. He narrowed his eyes, uneasy and curious at once. He'd have to speak with her more when there was time. "Ginny, I'm off. I need to get home for dinner. That Niffler's lovely. Maybe don't stuff his pouch so full. He's a bit chubby, you know." "See you at school, Lucien." Luna skipped away in her airy way. Lucien took Gingy from Ginny and felt a small surge of affection. He wasn't fat, was he? He was adorable. A few days later, Lucien walked through Diagon Alley with his Aunt Penelope. "That's Gringotts, the second safest place in the world after Hogwarts, the Wizarding Bank," he pointed out. "And that's Ollivander's. We bought my wand there. They've been making wands for over 2,000 years. And over there, Elop's Owl Emporium. Didn't you want an owl as a pet?" Lucien showed his aunt the shops. Penelope, visiting the wizarding market for the first time, found everything delightful. Wizards and witches of all ages were gathered to buy school supplies for the new term. Lucien would be a second year. He didn't need much beyond his textbooks. He explained that second year cut down on the number of flying lessons but lengthened other classes. Lucien, a young witch with soft brown hair, bounded up Hermione. She greeted Lucien, then smiled politely at Aunt Penelope. She had met her once at Lucien's birthday and was struck again by how kind and unassuming she was, nothing like the haughty pureblood types Hermione disliked. Penelope watched the two of them with a faint, knowing smile. She could see more than a casual friendship forming. She had been around enough to read the little signs. After a moment, Penelope, Lucien, and Hermione headed into Flourish and Blots. An announcement crackled through. "Breaking news. The internationally renowned author, recipient of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, 5-time winner of the Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award, honorary member of the Anti-Dark Arts League, author of Break with a Banshee, Voyages with Vampires, Wanderings with Werewolves, and A Year with a Yeti, Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart will be holding a book signing here in half an hour. Purchase his books now for a chance to be drawn as a lucky reader and take a photograph with Mr. Lockhart. Lucien raised an eyebrow. Lockhart, style over substance, a thief of others' stories who used memory charms to cover his tracks. Still, that same memory charm was an impressive piece of magic. If Lucien had the chance, he'd like to learn it. While his aunt chatted with Hermione's parents, Lucien made a polite excuse to slip away. He had a cooperation agreement to follow up on, discussed a few days before. Borgin and Burke's was the largest shop on Nocturne Alley. It specialized in dark arts objects, dangerous trinkets, and cursed curios gathered by its proprietor, Mr. Borgin. Harry was curled up inside a large black cabinet in one corner, feeling thoroughly miserable from a run of bad luck over the last few days. With Lucien's help, things at his aunt's had been getting better. The Dursleys had eased up, he was fed properly, and they didn't bully him as openly. He could read his magic books and do the extra work Lucien had set for him. Compared to his previous life, it was a huge improvement. Still, the three at Privet Drive avoided talking to him, which Harry had learned to be grateful for. No one bothered him anymore. But then, a week of peace had been broken by the sudden appearance of a house elf, calling himself Dobby. The elf stole his Hogwarts letters and then dumped a huge cake on the head of one of Uncle Vernon's guests. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon were furious, but Lucien's influence had protected Harry from punishment. Harry had even overheard them plotting to seal his window. He'd been counting down the days until term began. When Ron and the twins finally arrived to pick him up, the Dursleys sent him away like a plague. Harry was only glad to be going to Hogwarts. He'd been happy at the Weasleys too, except that he'd missed Lucien, who had apparently left a few days earlier. Harry had planned to go shopping in Diagon Alley with the Weasleys, but his first time using flue powder went wrong. He mispronounced the name and ended up in a place that looked like the inside of a nightmare. Withered hands, blood-stained cards, glass eyeballs, some of the items were displayed on cushions under glass. They were supposed to be valuable, but they were also terrifying. Huddled in the cabinet, Harry peered through a crack and watched Malfoy and a middle-aged man who looked like his father speak with Mr. Borgin. When they left, Mr. Borgin muttered to himself as he closed the door. "Sk, less than half the items sold," he complained. Harry waited for an opening to slip out. He was just about to push the door when the shop bell creaked and a voice he recognized called, "Mr. Borgin, I've brought the final pieces. Once you appraise them, we can finalize the contract, yes?" The shopkeeper smoothed his greasy hair and adopted an obsequious tone. "Mr. Grafton, seeing you is like seeing sunshine and wealth. I can already picture a very profitable collaboration." As the door opened, Harry's breath caught. Dark golden hair, pale face, and dark green eyes, Lucien stood in the doorway. Mr. Borgin's manner toward him was far more flattering than it had been with the Malfoys. Harry watched, puzzled. Mr. Borgin led Lucien to a seat and offered tea and pastries. Lucien waved a hand, and a small collection of bracelets, necklaces, and buttons appeared on the table. Mr. Borgin fitted a monocle of gears and cogs and began to inspect them carefully. "Oh, your workmanship is exquisite. Better than last time," Borgin said. "Hard to believe you have such skill in alchemy at your age. Could it be that Hogwarts' recent classes—" "Tell me what you think," Lucien interrupted. Mr. Borgin dropped his praise and got down to business. "These alchemical implements have fixed magical properties. The most valuable is the amulet that triggers a shield charm automatically. It would greatly enhance a wizard's chances in life-saving situations. We'd have to price that very high." Harry understood enough to know that Lucien was negotiating for Borgin and Burke's to sell these alchemy tools. The details and the haggling blurred past him as his legs began to go numb. Just as Lucien and Borgin finished, Lucien glanced toward the cabinet. Harry's heart tightened. Then Lucien raised a hand and waved. Harry calmed himself and pushed open the cabinet door, stepping out. "Who are you?" Mr. Borgin snapped, wary and unfriendly. "He's my friend," Lucien said smoothly. "We were playing hide-and-seek, and he must have gotten lost in there. Is that all right?" Instantly, the atmosphere changed. Borgen's face smoothed into a smile. Of course, little friend. But don't hide here again. My stock is for adults. Danger in every corner. That opal necklace next to you has already claimed 19 muggles." Harry stepped back, shivering, and took cover behind Lucien. It was obvious why Borgen had been so obsequious. Lucien was a major client, and his alchemical creations were exquisite and new, worth safeguarding rather than seizing. Borgen's earlier muttering about unsold items and the screams Harry had heard the other day made him a little nervous. Better not push him. Mr. Borgen politely escorted them out. The alley outside was squalid. Shops that dealt in dark arts lined both sides. Several shabbily dressed wizards saw the pair and immediately shrank away. An old witch, who had been walking away, turned at the sound and dropped a bowl of things that looked like dead fingernails. She didn't bother to pick them up before running off with surprising speed for her age. Harry realized at once that they weren't running from him. They were running from Lucien. Curious, he watched Lucien take out his wand when he noticed the soot on Harry. "Scourgify," Lucien said, and then reparo. In moments, Harry was clean again, the ashes gone, his glasses mended. His coloring looked healthier. Lucien had noticed that he no longer looked as thin and pale. Harry guessed the Dursleys had at least been feeding him properly. As they walked, Harry couldn't hide his curiosity. "Lucien, why did those people run off like that when they saw us?" Lucien put his wand away and answered calmly. "When I first came here, I met thieves, conmen, and a few who tried to curse me. People in Nocturne Alley don't like to be crossed." Harry's mind supplied images of villains everywhere. "Were you hurt? Did you see what they looked like? Should we report them to the ministry?" Lucien shook his head. "I'm all right. As for what they looked like," he pointed into the sky. Harry looked up and saw 7 or 8 shabbily dressed figures hanging upside down, suspended as if by invisible chains, forming an inverted cross. Their eyes were closed. Severed and congealed blood stained their necks and clothing, and their torn garments revealed wounds. Their faces, however, were startlingly clean, as if any blood that reached them was magically wiped away. Around them, several whips moved in the air, lashing at their bodies with audible smacks. A transparent barrier below the hanging figures prevented blood from dripping onto the pedestrians. Harry's stomach turned, but he recognized the intent. The people were being punished, rope-strung and whipped. They made no sound when they were struck. Lucien explained, as though he were pointing out a commonplace sight, "Those who tried to rob or curse me were dealt with like this. People here understand what happens to those who cross me." Harry stared. The old witch's sudden sprint made sense now. He asked, puzzled, "So you hang them close to Borgen and Burke's?" Lucien nodded. "Close enough to make sure Mr. Borgen hears. Give people a stick and also a carrot. Keeps them loyal and makes them useful. The shop owner has many connections here. He's useful to keep on side." Harry squinted up at the suspended figures. They didn't scream, and something about their stillness made him uneasy. He began to say, "Lucien, aren't they?" "They're not dead," Lucien cut in. "The whips themselves release stored healing potion at intervals. It keeps them from truly dying. The potion's been improved. It's very effective. Want to learn it after term starts?" Harry blinked. Of all the dark contraptions, whips that both bruise and heal, he couldn't tell whether he was impressed or horrified. Then Lucien asked, a small smile in his voice, "Do you feel sorry for them?" Harry shook his head immediately, voice soft but firm. "No, if you hadn't stopped them, they wouldn't have shown mercy. Magic and power both matter." Over the past year, Harry had seen Lucien use magic to repel Quirrell and Voldemort, and he'd seen him use wealth and influence to tame his aunt's household. Those things taught Harry that real safety required power, not to bully others, but to prevent being bullied. Lucien, watching him, seemed satisfied. Dumbledore, who would have hoped to teach Harry courage and boldness, had never asked him to be purely good at the expense of strength. A savior who could stand against Voldemort could be kind and gentle, yes, but he could not be weak, or so Lucien thought. Diagon Alley. "Lucien, thank you for the insecticidal potion you sent me. Otherwise, the cabbages at school would have been eaten by those awful carnivorous slugs," Hagrid said, carrying a large satchel as he chatted with Lucien. "You're welcome. Glad it helped," Lucien waved off. Hagrid rummaged in his bag and pulled out two enormous oranges, handing one to Lucien and one to Harry. Try them. Try them. I think they're delicious. I also bought some seeds to plant in the garden. When they fruit, come round and we'll have one together. Lucien stared at the orange in his hand. It was nearly half the size of his head. He couldn't eat that much in one sitting. Could it even be called an orange? Magic, he thought. For Hagrid, though, it was the perfect size. Being half-giant, Hagrid's appetite and requirements were not ordinary. After exchanging a few more words about seeds, Hagrid and Lucien said their goodbyes. Lucien tucked the huge orange into his pocket. Harry still held his orange, looking puzzled. Lucien produced a small cloth pouch and handed it to him. Put it in here first. Harry tried to push the orange into the palm-sized bag. To his surprise, it slid in smoothly and the pouch barely bulged. Lucien, is this like your pocket? The undetectable extension charm? He asked. Sort of. It's a shrinking luggage I made myself, Lucien explained. The charm behaved like an undetectable extension, but its principle was an ancient magic that condensed a foot into an inch. Inscribed into a miniature magical circuit, it didn't enlarge a container's space so much as shrink the items placed inside. Because of that, the charm could not be used to hold living things. Lucien had learned that from his teacher, Nicolas Flamel. Flamel's library was enormous. Lucien had picked up rare, clever magics there. He'd chosen the older technique partly because containers made with the extension charm were tightly regulated by the ministry. Fine for private use, they became complicated if sold. The market was also monopolized and outrageously expensive. By reviving a little-known method, Lucien made something regulators and competitors found hard to decipher and far easier and cheaper to produce. Harry turned the little bag over in his hands. It felt silk smooth, mostly black with simple silver embroidery. In one corner was a small embroidered emblem, an open book whose flapping pages suggested an eagle spreading its wings. On the cover, small but clear, were the letters L.G. He realized at once they were Lucien Grafton's initials and pointed to them. This is your logo. A trademark, Lucien corrected, smiling. It's a product. Harry's mind leapt ahead. He'd envied Lucien's pockets and convenience for a long time. The idea of fitting textbooks, cauldrons, or Quidditch gear into a pocket was irresistible. He'd tried the extension charm and found it maddeningly hard. Lucien had clearly mastered practical applications years ago. Now, with a ready-made bag in hand, Harry found himself tempted. How much is this one? He asked. Lucien's smile widened. The one you've got is the practical version. Roughly the size of a wardrobe, good for most school needs. 20 galleons. The effect lasts for 6 months. If you're interested, I'll sell it to you at cost, but you must help me promote it at Hogwarts, especially in Gryffindor. Harry didn't hesitate. He wasn't short of money, and promoting for a friend was easy enough. Lucien produced a list: trial, practical, advanced, and VIP versions. The cheapest trial model cost 5 sickles, about the pocket money most young wizards saved over a week or two. It was only the size of a school bag and lasted 2 months. The VIP model topped shelf in every way, but what caught Harry's eye was a line, highlighted in red. VIP customers may request custom embroidery, family crest, name, or preferred design. Why emphasize that? Harry asked. He thought the VIP's size and duration weren't worth such a price unless the embroidery was truly sought after. Some communities value status and honor, Lucien said with a faint amusement. They like their things personalized. Harry paid, handing over the galleons, and tucked the practical bag into his pocket. It was a small thing, but already it felt like a weight lifted, both literally and figuratively. Flourish and Blots was in chaos. Ladies, don't push! Mind the books! An exasperated shop assistant kept calling, while a crush of middle-aged women pressed forward. Gilderoy Lockhart's signing had sent them into a frenzy. Lockhart himself made an entrance in a forget-me-not blue robe, his wavy blonde hair under a pointed hat and a practiced, dazzling smile on his face. The women in the queue screamed his name, waved copies of his books, and swooned at every pose. Lucien watched him with mild distaste. Lockhart looked the part of what the crowd loved, handsome, charming, and endlessly polished, but Lucien thought him hollow. His magical circuit was poor, his tricks superficial. He had one effective trick, the memory charm. Compared to others who could teach real things in that position, Quirrell, Lupin, the later Barty, Lockhart was a waste. If the Defense Against the Dark Arts post remained cursed, perhaps this flashy fraud might not last the school year. Lucien briefly considered whether to hasten matters, then dismissed the thought. Mischief had consequences. A short man with a huge black camera elbowed his way forward, shouting, "Out of the way! This is for the Daily Prophet!" He hopped and twisted, trying to get the perfect shot of Lockhart. He hadn't noticed he was barreling toward Aunt Penelope, who stood near Lucien, absorbed in watching the author. Lucien did notice. He didn't move, but as the reporter came within half a meter, a faint red flare pulsed from one of Aunt Penelope's rings. The reporter tripped as if his feet had betrayed him and went down hard, face first into the floor. His camera flew from his hands, skittered across the shop, and landed near Lockhart. For a second, Lockhart's smile faltered. Annoyance flickered across his features at the sudden inconvenience. Lucien watched the fall without interest. He'd calibrated the alchemical ring to produce a non-lethal, adjustable countermeasure and included warning and communication effects so he would be alerted if anything serious occurred. He'd made a set of such accessories for his aunt out of caution. Fame attracts enemies, and Lucien didn't like to gamble on safety. If anyone tried to cause trouble for his family, he wanted contingencies. The reporter scrambled back to his feet and recovered his camera. Lockhart, never one to miss an opportunity, saw a familiar pair of dark green eyes fixed on him in the crowd. He turned and immediately recognized the owner, the boy who lived, messy black hair, round glasses, the look that made him famously famous. Beside Harry stood a composed, elegant woman, Aunt Penelope, rather than the adoring desperation Lockhart saw everywhere else. Those two were watching with steady scrutiny, not the usual adulation. It made Lockhart uncomfortable. "Harry Potter! Isn't that Harry Potter?" Lockhart cried, bright and eager, already stepping forward. Meeting a living legend could be used. He tried, subtly, to skirt the handsome young man nearby, and instead reached out to seize Harry's arm. Being photographed with the savior would do wonders for his profile. He'd built a career on publicity and carefully borrowed glory. A fresh connection to the boy who lived was irresistible. Harry blushed at the attention. He glanced to Lucien, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. The warning about Lockhart's opportunism had been accurate. When Lockhart pulled Harry toward the signing table, the reporter, who had just recovered his camera, saw his chance and shifted into action without question. "Please record this for me," Lockhart whispered to the man, and the reporter promptly began filming. Lucien, standing among the crowd, slipped his wand back into his sleeve. This was a rare, useful moment for promotion. He wouldn't let it go to waste. 179. Harry takes the initiative. The constant click-clack of camera shutters filled the air. "That's a lovely smile, Harry. We could make the front page," Lockhart murmured, flashing his signature grin. Harry, embarrassed, found his eccentric uncle even more peculiar than usual. When the clicks paused, Lockhart announced theatrically, "Ladies and gentlemen, what an exciting moment. When little Harry stepped into the bookstore this morning to buy my autobiography, Magical Me, a book that has topped the Daily Prophet bestseller list for 27 consecutive weeks, he surely couldn't have imagined." Lockhart built the moment for his adoring crowd. I am going to give my complete works to Harry for free." The applause swelled. Lockhart, basking in it, was about to wave Harry toward the signing table when he failed to notice Harry taking several deep breaths and clutching a black cloth bag embroidered with silver. "Oh, these books are so many and so heavy, I really can't carry them," Harry said in an exaggerated loud voice. Lockhart's smile froze. He glanced at the boy, then at the books. What was this child doing? How could a few books possibly be heavy? Had Harry not been eating and exercising? Lockhart opened his mouth to improvise his way out of this awkwardness, but a chorus of voices rang up from below the stage. "Yes, great savior, what are we to do? I also have to cart all these books and cauldrons to school. It's so heavy. Legendary boy, any ideas?" Lockhart stood bewildered. Harry's face reddened. He looked toward the Weasley twins weaving through the crowd. Those lines about savior and legendary boy hadn't been in the script. There was no backing out, though. Harry steadied himself, held the black bag up, and announced in a formal voice, "It's fine. I've got it. A shrinking luggage, a small tool. No matter how many books, it can hold them all." He drew his wand, levitated the books, and guided them one by one into the bag. He held the opening to the crowd, angling it so the embroidered corner and logo were plainly visible. Still struggling with large and small bags while traveling? Worried about your child's burden of books? The shrinking luggage, a small tool, will solve your worries. For more details, please visit the XXX shop in Diagon Alley. Lockhart watched, stunned. Was this kid advertising? At his book signing? Was Harry taking over the spotlight? Lockhart had only intended to bask in Harry's fame, not be upstaged. While he fumed, a Daily Prophet photographer had already snapped dozens of shots the moment Harry produced the shrinking luggage. Lockhart selling a flimsy book made the news occasionally. Nothing rivaled the savior endorsing a product. This was real news. Who's the genius who got Harry Potter to promote a product? A reporter murmured between snaps, framing every shot to include both Harry's face and the shrinking luggage, a small tool. LG? A new shop? Looks interesting. I should go check it out. I just don't know the price. Containers with undetectable extension charms aren't cheap. Exactly. They monopolize and jack up the prices. Oh, Merlin, the greedy wizards. The crowd buzzed with interest. Harry posed a few more times, enjoying the sleek, useful charm he'd learned about from Lucien. To avoid the signing frenzy that would surely follow, Lucien had already guided Aunt Penelope to a quieter corner of the shop. Is that child really that famous in your wizarding world? Aunt Penelope asked. Lucien wasn't surprised. Judging by the crowd's reaction, it was an easy conclusion. Yes, he's practically a celebrity among muggles. Penelope nodded, understanding why Lucien would enlist Harry for publicity. She didn't need to remind him that favors between friends required reciprocity. She trusted him to handle such matters. And Lockhart, are his adventures really as grand as he claims? Lucien smiled at her pointedness. You noticed, as expected. Penelope absently rubbed the ring on her finger, calm. He seems a talented writer, but I don't see the adventurous spirit in him. It's hard to reconcile him with those thrilling tales. As head of the Grafton family, Penelope had a keen eye for people. Lucien couldn't fault her judgment. Unlike our Lucien, who's not only handsome but genuinely talented. Speaking of which, have you made any suitable female acquaintances at school? Didn't I send you some jewelry? If not, you could meet the girls from the Campbell and Fitzgerald families during the winter break. Her topic shifted so quickly, Lucien almost missed the thread. Ah, the great savior has arrived. Draco Malfoy was blocking Harry's path as he squeezed through the crowd, smirking for reasons only he understood. Harry didn't want to deal with him. Malfoy, do you need something? Malfoy shrugged. Alas, Potter, you had no luck this summer, did you? School's starting, and at last you're back in the news and showing your face. How envious. Harry frowned. Without Lucien's influence over the summer, Malfoy seemed more inclined to flaunt himself. What exactly do you want? Malfoy stopped playing coy and produced several moving photographs from his robe, thrusting them at Harry. Ahem, Lucien and I went to my family's dragon farm this summer. I took some photos. Help me pick which one's suitable. Ginny, standing nearby and ready to speak for Harry, formed a puzzled thought bubble above her head. The Malfoys were supposed to be the bad kind of pure-blood family, yet this Malfoy came across as almost clueless. Ron, who had just arrived, looked equally baffled until Ginny whispered the situation to him. Malfoy sneered at the Weasleys' red hair. Going to play still costs a lot of money, you know. Perhaps some people should spend their money on textbooks and wands. Secondhand, of course. Ron nearly dropped the stack of books in his arms and moved to take offense. Then Harry, abruptly, asked, Did Lucien visit your house this summer, Malfoy? Malfoy's instinctive reply was awkward. No, ahem. Invitations between noble families are very formal, you see. There's a whole process. After attending Lucien's birthday, Malfoy had learned something of the Grafton family's status in the Muggle world. Lucien deserved decorum, he believed. But before Malfoy could lecture on noble etiquette, Harry cut in. Lucien visited my house. He visited Ron's as well. I think visiting a friend's home is more meaningful than touring a dragon farm, don't you? Malfoy was speechless. He'd been outmaneuvered by Harry and by a Weasley. A large hand then fell on Malfoy's shoulder. Mr. Potter, said Lucius Malfoy smoothly. I am Lucius Malfoy. We finally meet. Lucius shook Harry's hand firmly and gave a tug. He leaned in to inspect the lightning-shaped scar on Harry's forehead. "Truly a legendary mark," he murmured. He let go and glanced down at Hermione, Muggleborn, and the Weasleys, eyes full of disdain. Before he could speak further, a young man of exceptional bearing approached. Lucius recognized him instantly, Lucien Grafton. Those dark green eyes, the composed demeanor. He had met Lucien once before when Draco had been injured at Hogwarts. Even then, Lucius had noted something exceptional about the young man, and seeing him again only deepened that impression. Lucius extended his hand to Lucien with refined courtesy. "Thank you for your help with Draco. That child was fortunate to gain your friendship." Lucien returned the pleasantries with equal courtesy. "Draco's foundation is solid. It must come from excellent family education." As they spoke, a subtle black whirlpool seemed to spin in the depths of Lucien's eyes. His peripheral gaze flicked to Lucius's waist and registered something sinister and cold, the unmistakable aura of a Horcrux. Lucius, of course, paid no attention to the Muggle-born and shabby purebloods around them. After a few light exchanges, Lucius led Draco toward the back of the shop. As they passed, Lucien's wand flicked inside his sleeve, and an invisible mark slipped onto the diary tucked under Lucius's arm. Lucius didn't notice. Lucien stayed and chatted with Harry and the others a while longer. After hearing about their recent summer, he shook his head with a faint smile. They were still children. When the conversation ended, Lucien and Aunt Penelope walked through Diagon Alley again. He bought a broomstick and intended to work on some alchemical designs. He saw Aunt Penelope into the carriage and told her to go home first. He had something to attend to and would return soon. During the walk, Lucien kept sensing the faint magical mark he had placed on the diary. It had been stationary inside flourish and blots, until suddenly it began to move. He followed the shifting trace through the street. The trail of magical fluctuation led him to a small, excited crowd. The person at the center drew a frown from Lucien. Gilderoy Lockhart, all blonde pomposity and peacock finery, stood grinning with the diary in his hands. How had the diary ended up with him? Lucien had expected the diary to go to Ginny Weasley, triggering the yearly crisis as the original plot required. His plan was to seize it once Ginny had it, but some other influence had redirected it. He had also been curious what would happen if the plot changed. That curiosity had been why he marked the diary to track it. He had not expected Lockhart to be the one holding it. Could fate be correcting itself? Was the diary's movement a sign that Hogwarts would still face disaster? The diary was a Horcrux, a fragment of Lord Voldemort's soul. Voldemort had cursed the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, and Lockhart had just been appointed to that position. Had the curse already taken hold? Could a cursed professor and the soul fragment intersect? It could be mere coincidence or something more. Lockhart, unaware he was being watched, simply felt he had acquired treasure. He was convinced a grand adventure was about to unfold. If he could write it down, it would be his greatest book yet. A seductive phantom voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "You will become the most famous wizard. You will be a true VIP with endless glory and wealth. Go. Go to Hogwarts. You will get everything you desire." Hogwarts platform smelled of smoke and engine oil and the last of the day's steam. As Lucien stepped off the train, a booming voice carried across the crowd. "All right, first years over here!" Hagrid stood under the gaslight, lamp in hand, calling the new students forward. He noticed Lucien and ambled over with his usual booming grin. "Who, another school year, eh? Time flies, doesn't it?" Lucien smiled and nodded. "Yes, this year should be interesting." "Well, have a good term of learning." "Oh, weren't Harry and the others with you?" Lucien glanced up at the moonlit sky. "They'll be along soon. They will." Hagrid waved and hustled the first years off toward the route of the Founders, as he always did, a tradition to be repeated for the new arrivals. Older students could simply take the carriages. Lucien climbed into a thestral-drawn carriage and, after 2 months away, wound his way through the familiar grounds toward Hogwarts Castle. There was something about the place that always made young wizards feel at home. The Great Hall was quiet when he arrived. A few older students gathered in 2s and 3s at the long tables. Lucien headed straight for the Ravenclaw table to settle in for the sorting later. Then he noticed 2 faces at the Gryffindor table that ought not to have been there. Harry and Ron. They sat hunched together like they'd been through a very bad night. There was a pallor to them, as if the air around them had been sucked of color. They should have been late. Everyone knew the story of the flying car. But there they were, and earlier than expected. When Lucien's voice reached them, Harry and Ron looked up. Harry seemed exhausted but steady enough. Ron looked on the edge of collapse. "Lucien," Ron muttered, almost to himself. "I'm done for. Can you make me beef stew with potatoes, mapo tofu, and boiled chicken again? I don't want any regrets." Lucien blinked at the odd last meal list, but kept his voice patient. "What happened to you two?" Harry adjusted his glasses and ran a tired hand through his hair. "Let me tell you," he said. Earlier that day, hours before the sorting, Harry and Ron had packed the old Ford Anglia with trunks and pets. Ron had been overconfident about his driving. "Don't worry," he'd said, thumping the steering wheel. "Dad and Lucien did loads of work on this car over the summer. I learned a bit. It'll be fine." Lucien had indeed helped Mr. Weasley. He added an automatic invisibility function so the car wouldn't be seen by muggles, reinforced sections of the chassis, optimized the magic energy reserves, and installed a basic automatic return navigation. The goal had been to make the car safer and keep Mr. Weasley out of trouble with the Ministry. From Lucien's perspective, the modifications had gone well, so the old car lifted off and became transparent in midair. Muggles saw nothing as it drifted along the clouds. Ron was proud. "Hey, Dad won't stop telling anyone. Says some of us wizards understand Muggle things and magic both." He steered with a grin, chomping on a chocolate frog, and played up the drama for Harry. "Relax. Captain Ron will deliver the great Harry Potter to Hogwarts." For a while, the flight was perfect. They ate sweets, admired the rolling countryside below, and swapped stories. But hours of steering tired even Ron, and boredom crept in. "If only we could get there faster," Harry said, stretching against the car frame. "Of course," Ron said, slapping his forehead. "There's an accelerator my dad's been tinkering with. I helped with it." He thumbed open a concealed panel. Gears and dials glinted behind the dashboard. He produced a bright red button with a flourish. "What's that?" Harry asked. "Acceleration. Big time." Ron beamed and pressed it. Two fiery trails burst from the rear of the Anglia. They felt the push and the thrill. "Brilliant," Ron whooped. "We'll surprise them at school." They left the Hogwarts Express in their wake and rocketed along the line toward the castle. The sun was dipping and the turrets were beginning to silhouette the horizon. Harry told Ron, "We should turn it off. We're almost there." Ron tapped the button twice. Nothing. He pressed again. The accelerator didn't respond. Harry felt that unease that came with machines refusing to obey. "Stop the car," Harry said, voice thin. Ron's face went white. He stomped the brake, jammed at controls. Nothing. "We can circle," Ron said, but the car lurched wildly, a metallic shriek of failing control. They hadn't had time to brace when the Anglia plowed into a massive tree. They expected to be smashed. Instead, the car's outer panels flared with a faint sudden light and a resounding crack. An enormous hole split the tree and branches exploded outward. The Anglia, baton of chaos, ricocheted and hurtled toward one of the castle towers. Back at the Ravenclaw table, Lucien fell quiet as Harry finished. He had known his modifications carried risks. His auto-invisibility and navigation would prevent Muggles and Ministry fuss, but the extra work Mr. Weasley had time to add over the summer clearly took things in a new direction. Good intentions, poor execution. One hand's improvement had invited the other hand's disaster. "So you crashed into the Humping Willow and then into the tower with the headmaster's office?" Lucien asked. "Yes," Harry said. Lucien didn't press whether Dumbledore had been in his office at the time. Even a flying car couldn't plausibly harm the likes of Dumbledore. "I don't think the Willow's completely ruined," Harry said softly. "The gap wasn't huge. Maybe it can be saved." Ron cut in with a bleak smile. "Yeah, but we scared the headmaster's bird to death." They both blinked at Lucien's reaction when he named the phoenix. "Fawkes? Scared to death?" Harry and Ron stared. "How did you know?" Lucien answered frankly. "That was a phoenix's rebirth. It looks like the bird entered its cycle early from the shock." Hearing that, they both exhaled in relief, then countered with fresh misery. "Professor Snape was first to the headmaster's office," Harry said. "He got here almost as soon as we did." Snape wouldn't have been waiting for us because he forecasted a flying car, Ron said, bitter. Maybe he was there for something else. He didn't spare us. He looked like he wanted to throw us out. And then Dumbledore came and said he'd write to our families. He won't decide the punishment until he talks it over with Professor McGonagall. It's never happened before, officially driving a car into the headmaster's office. When Dumbledore mentioned sending letters, Lucien noticed the difference in the boys' reactions. Harry seemed resigned. The Dursleys had never been soft, so Harry expected little. Ron, however, was terrified. The Weasleys would care deeply about what the headmaster wrote. Time moved on. The opening ceremony began, and the older students watched the sorting with the same mixture of amusement and nostalgia they always did. Lucien watched the first years arrive. There seemed to be more of them this year. Perhaps a small baby boom in the wizarding world, he thought with a small smile. More new customers for the Weasley twins and for his own designs. Professor McGonagall took up the sorting hat and explained the rules. The hat sat on the stool, old, patched, and odd. A murmur rippled through the hall. Is that gray-white? Wasn't it brown last year? Maybe it's a new hat? Looks like the patches are in the same places, though. It's the same hat. Maybe it's been enchanted to change color, or someone cleaned it. The idea of magical color shifts was acceptable. Wizards had many enchantments. But one comment made a ripple of awkward laughter and then a hush. Maybe they finally cleaned off 1,000 years of head grease. Shut up, someone hissed. Don't say another word. Lucien smirked inwardly. He had asked the sorting hat to change after he'd worn it, had prodded Dumbledore about it, so perhaps he was partly to thank for the hat being fresher than usual. It was nice to think he'd done another small favor for future students. The sorting proceeded. Lucien noticed a repetitious motion. Each new student who got sorted glanced at the Ravenclaw table. Odd. The hat must be doing something, sly words into their ears, nudging them a little more aware of Ravenclaw than usual. The first Ravenclaw entrant was a girl, and the table applauded her warmly. Lucien joined in. She curtsied then, unexpected, swept her gaze across the hall as if searching for someone. That gaze landed on Lucien, and she crossed the space between them, direct and unembarrassed. She stopped in front of him and asked in a low voice, eyes huge, "Excuse me, are you Senior Lucien Grafton?" Lucien felt his heart skip. The sorting hat's voice and its conversation in his mind flashed back, an odd little exchange he'd had with the hat months before. The memory was a warm, slightly unnerving echo, and now this first year's question connected it like a thread.